I would say it wasn't a single. I think one of my best solo years, about 2022, I got like $1.8 million solo for like 10 different projects. And it ranged between the Omega Lamplighters, which is a youth program. Appreciate that. It was the Omega Lamplighters, which is a youth program under Omega Psi Phi fraternity. We got our first allocation there. I had one allocation for a suicide prevention program, another one for a scholarship for low-income college students, another one for elderly for youth students to essentially teach old people to stop being scammed online so they can understand. Because during the pandemic, everybody was scamming the old folks, right? So they ended up being a different mix there. Also, some money for people that were coming out of prison so that they could transition back into life well, so at least the workforce development part was there. So to me, it was more getting out of the narrative of DeSantis and the nonsense.
You right, son, my bad. Give him 90 yards. I told you I had it. What told his mama told me he needed a scholarship. He needed a change in his life. And I'm going to give it to him in Eugene, baby. I'm going to give it to him in Eugene. We're going to that out. We're going to that out. We're going to the 90 yards. There ain't no time to take us home.
Camera for what it is, and I don't think I have all the settings right. I worked on my lighting. My lighting was trash. I'm still working on my mic, still trying to get my sounds and system together, but I appreciate y'all tapping in today. It's a good Wednesday. Yesterday's stream, I had to cut short. I had some work to do. I picked up a new client about a week or two ago, got referred by a client. And they have a huge project that I'm probably gonna have to go to South Florida for sometime next week to do some lobbying work, actually be lobbying. So I'll most likely shoot some of that content, what I can shoot with my Meta Ray Bans. And I actually have weeks of content to post back from session. Actually, I don't know why. I've edited it up. I just haven't released it, to be real. And I think I need to release my Meta Ray Bans content, but I'm just trying to finish setting up some of the stream. I'm going to actually tap into some of this Diddy trial because the Diddy trial is wild from what everybody's saying. Congrats, brother. Thanks, bro. What happened? Somebody randomly text me a random gift. I need to finish syncing all my contacts between my old phone and my new phone because I don't even know who this is texting me. Let me I hope they ain't on the stream. I gotta get that together. Hold on, let me make sure this is synced in. Oh, this on the wrong channel. All right, that's good there. Yo ass. I don't know what I did, chat. Somebody texted me now saying I did something. I gotta check. See, that's a problem. I need to sync my contacts. Oh, Rev. Oh, bro, I'm just speaking facts. Bruh, oh, it must be. Man, listen. I'm gonna say this now. I should probably go live on Instagram too, shouldn't I? Right. There are people out here who just placate the bullshit. And before we start the stream, before I get into the Diddy stuff and everything else like that, right? People just like spinning the narrative. Like right now they're dealing with an issue in Florida where Governor Ron DeSantis has handpicked someone to be the next president of the university, right? Cool. The issue is everybody's making it about race and MAGA. What they're not going back and saying is like, hey, y'all forget when a year or two ago, they had this guy present a $230 million check to the university at graduation just to find out it was a fraud, right? That happened. And then they lost institutional control. They had an investigation. They removed the president. Some of the other people got moved around, people doubling up jobs, all type of institutional like recklessness going on, right? Love FAMU though. But now the governor's picked somebody, and I'm gonna tell you the real, politically. About 2 months ago, the governor sat down with members of the Florida Black Caucus, right? And this is confirmed. We're not saying who. This has been confirmed by at least 4 people in the room, right? And the governor's people. That they gave him a list of people to take over as the next president of FAMU after this institutional debacle, right? And the Black Caucus picked this lady to say, hey, you know what? Out of everything, she has experience with the legislature. We think she'll be good. All this other shit. Great. Perfect. They go through the process. You know, politics work slow. So that's 2 months ago. Damn near Black History Month. Now it comes out, oh, she's a Republican plant. She's all that. No, I'm not saying that she's not a Republican, a MAGA supporter. But I will say this, the only bad thing that anybody said about her, respectfully, is that her wigs be dry, right? Nobody else in the room, that had happened. Nobody else said anything outside the fact of like, you know what, hey, this lady could be president. She's a DeSantis pick. Her wig's dry, and that's it, right? That didn't seem too bad, but now the FAMU alum have made an issue. They got the cinematographer, director Will Packer out there, and they're having a protest now in Tallahassee, which is good and all, right? My issue with that is, to be respectful, why y'all not protesting about getting the funding that FAMU is actually requesting this year to make sure that the campus security is on point, that the lighting, that the buildings are, the technology, everything there is up to par. You're worried about the president right now because it's a hot button issue, because it's good to get Will Packer and Roland Martin and everybody else spinning the fucking block, poverty pimping people about, oh, MAGA to come and take over the school. Cool. Where the fuck were you when they had these higher education meetings about the allocations going to the schools like FAMU, UCF, University of Florida, and others? We have 4 HBCUs in the state. All 4 of them are dealing with the same security hardening issues, right? Because when Edward Waters had a college shooting or shooting around their college at the Dollar General that killed people, they were told to turn down the money that the governor was offering. That's what I heard. That's what was told out here in these streets, right? These political streets. On top of it, if this is an issue, why aren't y'all marching and protesting for every fucking HBCU in the state to make sure that those students are protected, whether they're coming from Detroit, Atlanta, Jacksonville, damn California, into our state? Let's make sure that these, whatever we're talking about, because this is the state where, you know, we're spinning this narrative that it's a dangerous state to live in. It's a dangerous place to be. You know, if you're black in Florida, you know, NAACP, you can't live here. That's what Ben Crump and all these pedal pushing poverty pimp pushers are telling you. The issue is y'all not even involved on a regular basis. You can't tell me what the per pupil student funding is in your K through 12 or in your higher education, right? But it's a spin the block narrative on what drives the narrative of, like, you know what, they're being racist. They're trying to take our schools. They're trying to take it. No, they're not. You don't even care enough to give back to your university. And I don't want nobody to come talk to me like, oh, well, Phil, what have you done? There's a whole 11 years ago, there's a whole pharmacy building that I helped get the funding for, $14 million to build that on campus, to make sure that the university didn't lose their accreditation for their pharmacy school, made sure that the teacher bonuses were there, and made sure that other things were happening. But what we get into this is exactly what's in the comments. It's selective outrage. It's selective outrage over shit that doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of shit, because y'all not involved on a regular basis. What the fuck does Will Packer, a cinematographer, do, and what impact will he make? The man put a whole amphitheater on campus. You can't even have concerts on campus because the venue is too small. What we have are these Jack and Jill pencil pushers in the HBCU community that complain about shit, because guess what? They'll complain about the fact of how we're losing the $64 million in the funding. What they didn't talk about is, hey, it's going back to the 2021 level. 2021 level was because the federal government committed $300 million to the university to help build the hospital, and the hospital construction is complete. And right now, Howard University, if you go through the capital improvement plan, if we want to go through it on stream, we can, right? The capital improvement plan talks about housing. If they're prioritizing housing, and they haven't clarified that to the congressional members to make sure it's there, then that's an issue, right? But half of y'all don't even know the priority of what the structure was. You just want to spin the block on the narrative of the bullshit. And the bullshit is you're not reading the text, you're not reading the bills, you're not reading anything, right? You're just spinning the block on the narrative. And that's the bigger issue, I feel, collectively in this whole legislative process. So before we get into Diddy, before we get into Trump, I just want to at least establish some kind of, as we build this out, because I personally feel, relax, bro, you're not going to bring no change. Carlos, I'm already bringing change, bro, so I'm not going to get into that. But regardless of it, marching and protesting about an issue that doesn't matter isn't going to bring the change. The deck is stacked because when the governor, realistically for FAMU specifically, when he appointed all these people to the board of trustees, he stacked the deck in his favor. So whoever the appointee is, they're going to get there, right? So the marching and protest is one thing, but marching and protest about something that's tangible. That's the biggest issue. You're not going to do anything besides get a documentary, some conversation with Roland Martin, or at least spinning the block on what the Republican Party is doing and hurting HBCUs, but you're not even in the conversation any other day, any committee meeting regarding any of this shit. So that's my 2 cents before we get into the brass tacks of it. You got us all in mind and common sense. So I appreciate the sub 3D Destroyer. But my biggest thing is, and that's to the point as we start to build this out before we get to the Diddy stuff, because the Diddy stuff is crazy. I didn't pay attention to day 1 and day 2, so I'm gonna get into some of that on top of what's happening today. But on top of it, I never wanted to work in politics. If this is your first time here, my bit of my story, unpaid intern, fell into politics, worked my way through. I've been doing this 15 years, right? But I've been working since I was 13. My mom had to tell me, go get a job to help support yourself, put clothes on my back to go to school and feed myself at school for what it is. I've been a bag boy. I've been a banker. I've worked overnight at Target. I've done a lot of shit. The same Target y'all boycotting, right? I've done a little bit of everything in my grand mix of customer service before I fell into politics. So I understand people. I understand how to move people. And in politics, I've helped elect people to Congress, help elect people to state legislatures and mayors and county commissioners and a whole lot of plethora of things on top of putting constitutional amendments on the ballot. And if you don't know that, that just change the constitution of a state. But regardless of it all, my biggest thing is making an impact. And I've done that for 15 years. So I'm not worried about what somebody can say in the comments. I'm just worried about helping change the narrative. So at least each one teach one, so we can at least say, you know what? Hey, this is kind of real. Why aren't we worried about the security of these kids at the #1 public HBCU in the country, instead of worrying about the politicized narrative of the president that'll be there, because the president can always be replaced. Either way, let's get into the Diddy trial. I need to do a catch up there. Let me set my finish set myself. If you know, I'm not a professional streamer. We really just starting this thing for real. But the channel has grown so exceptionally well over the past few weeks. I'm just like, damn, you know, I didn't expect it to be this. But let's hold on. That's not it. Is this it? This is what I picked up yesterday. I think this is it. Picked up yesterday on the trial. Cassie's testimony is going to be later, but I just at least want to start here because I haven't paid attention to half of the Diddy stuff. The world's moving too fast. We have Trump one day, my girl Jasmine Crockett, all these political interviews, all these states passing and implementing state laws, and the Diddy trial is going to drive the numbers up. But either way, let's get into this as we go through this afternoon. I'm gonna order some lunch. We had pizza yesterday. I may just have a salad today. Hey, Lily, how you doing? Appreciate y'all tapping in.
Why this? I was particular. It was the wants. Cassie, I know. I'm hoping that she would stay on, but and also, it's the ocular migraine was dismissed as well too. So that was just kind of some of the look at.
All women, alternates, all walks of life, all different. By the way, talking about earlier today, you and I were doing a live guy was so loud outside live shot. Ryan Butler, friend of the show. Now, I want to get into what happened with those. So, Prosecution started with instructions. Prosecution started with their USA.
Hey, Scott.
What was her opening? What were the highlights?
Definitely, and you know, the government cultural icon, larger than life, but that you know, crimes, person, sex crimes, obstruction, you know, already laid, private, third super, all the stuff you are kind of talked more. You know, example, Diddy government for her, who found out bodyguards and
I'm good, Scott. Appreciate you tapping into the stream. Everybody here today, man. Appreciate y'all.
apartment, broke into Cassie's apartment. So, you know, government relied on this. Together, they all worked. Howard. That kind of natural. On the back of his neck, that I salary. You know, and so most part, I think I'm just going into you know, jobs, King. You know, back to like
Hello.
for women.
I ain't gonna hold you. This isn't. I'm not Diddy. Something about those French tips used to have between like 1992 till about 2013. Them French tips used to be everything, bro. I don't care. That, like, as a man, to me, that was the cleanest nail set. Y'all got the ladies have super long nail sets. Like, hold on, nails almost like this these days per nail, right? It wasn't all that back in the day. It was a simple French tip, a little white line on the toes and the fingers. That'll set it off. And it was a staple. Now, I'm not agreeing with nothing Diddy did, nothing Diddy said, but that's the one thing I can sit here and be like, you know what? I don't need no.
However, Diddy was seeing a number of other people. She introduced two freak-offs by Diddy, and she tried one just to essentially make him happy. The government said that Jane was nervous and thought the freak-off, their alleged victim as well, too, who will be going by a pseudonym Jane, presumably Jane Doe. And so
The police in the background kind of pissed me off, but this is interesting.
As far as what the government was kind of painting. Now, I will say, Jesse, I was a little disappointed in kind of the delivery of opening statements. I will say that, you know, and maybe it was just because this is a delicate matter. We're talking about sex. We're talking about trafficking. We're talking about alleged victims of, you know, domestic violence as well too. But as far as the most part goes, I was really expecting, and maybe it's just because I assumed that because, you know, we have Hollywood, we have star power, that it would just be like a TV show, just very animated, but it wasn't. Pretty much ASA Emily Johnson, she got up here with her notes. She just pretty much read off her opening statements and just kind of essentially how a school teacher would do if they were giving a lecture to their students. It wasn't very animated or anything like that. To be honest, I was a little disappointed, honestly, on both ends of just how the
Yeah, I don't want to hear all that.
statements. But, you know, Jesse had said last time that
I want to skip forward. Got to be something.
they were paying close attention. It didn't seem like anyone was necessarily dozing off or just kind of avoiding what was being told right in front of them. For the most part, it seemed like these jurors were very attentive and listening very thoroughly. Some were taking notes. Some were just, you know.
I mean, these are the jurors that, and this is day one, if anybody just tapped into the stream. The jurors have to pay attention. They can't be sitting around here sleeping.
Just with their brain. I do want to go back really.
This man's life is on the line.
Talk about Mia because, you know, I do want to emphasize to the viewers, I took lots of notes and sometimes these just get kind of lost in the shuffle. But as far as Mia goes, she was another person that the government had talked about. You know, she had worked for Diddy for years, but the government was saying that she was subjected to sexual assault too, that Diddy would allegedly put his hand up her skirt, snuck into her bedroom and essentially sexually assaulted her.
That's wild.
So this was another person, in addition to both Cassie as well as Jane Doe, that we really got to see, you know, just kind of the lengths of these allegations. And what kind of makes Mia a little bit differently is that she worked for Diddy for a number of years and continued to do so even afterwards. The government was talking about she couldn't talk about, you know, what she had gone through until recently.
Like, for real, man. And we're gonna get through every caricature of Diddy. Looks more crazy and crazy by the day. And this is like day one, and I hope he's not on that brother love shit. They're not looking for brother love right now, bro. They're looking to sentence your ass up under the jail. Because the Cassie video is so damaging, it's like there's no really coming back from that ever to me.
We're kind of essentially, the jury was paying very close attention to, you know, this very complicated case. Because, you know, Jesse, you and I, we've obviously been in it since we work here at Law and Crime. We've been covering this case since November of 2023, or when it first started with Cassie's lawsuit. Yep. But for some of these jurors, they're really getting they're really just now getting the full case at them, and a lot was thrown at them in just day one.
Well, hopefully they don't know everything about it like we do, and they were being honest during the jury selection process. Okay, so now let's talk about the defense. Tenny Garagos, female attorney, delivering the opening statement. I think that was deliberate in a case of sex trafficking and racketeering and prostitution. What were the highlights of her opening statement? What is the defense they're moving forward with?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised that Tenny Garagos gave the opening statements for the defense. It seemed like for the longest time, Mark Agnifilo was running the show, but it makes a lot of sense as to why it was Tenny Garagos giving those opening statements. Alexandra Shapiro, she's a great defense attorney, but she is kind of a spitfire, so I think Tenny was kind of the right approach here. She, just like Emily Johnson, kind of gave it very just, you know, matter of fact. She came up there with her notes or for her opening statements and just kind of laid it out for the jury. There wasn't a lot of animation, even with her defense openings as well too, but you know, from the defense's perspective, they were painting Diddy and they were honest about it. He's a complicated man, but this isn't a complicated case. Essentially, the defense was saying this is about real relationships that the government is turning into a RICO charge and sex trafficking, and this isn't the case that a lot of people may have heard on the news. That's what the defense says, and so they said that essentially Diddy's story will be told over the next 2 months. You know, one point that came up probably within maybe the first 5 minutes of the defense opening was, you know, Tenny Garagos introduced Diddy officially to the jury, where it's like, this is our defendant, Sean Combs, because they refer to him as Sean Combs. It's never really Diddy or P. Diddy or Puff Daddy.
Yeah, they're trying to humanize Diddy, man. Ain't no humanizing Diddy after that shit. We all seen the tape. We've all seen the tape.
So he kind of stood up, sat back down a little bit after his introduction. And, you know, this was something that we were expecting, is for pretty much the government, or excuse me, the defense, to say that the government shouldn't have any type of place inside of Diddy's bedroom. That, you know, they admit that Diddy had a temper, especially when he drinks. You know, sometimes he gets so angry. They admit that Diddy lied.
I agree with you, 3D.
Not the best boyfriend or partner. He was kind of mean to his girlfriends, but he's not charged with being mean. He's not charged with being a jerk to his girlfriends. Essentially, he's charged with criminal acts that they say isn't criminal at all. They pretty much kind of talk about that they'll see domestic violence in this trial. And while they do take it seriously, it doesn't amount to sex trafficking from their perspective at all. You know, they admit to Diddy doing drugs. They admitted to Diddy using baby oil. They said it's not a federal crime to use either of those things.
So it just could be like, we're going to embarrass the shit out of you on top of it, but you're not beating this case because we don't get you on some sex trafficking or anything else. It kind of reminds me, I watched the documentary on Netflix, Shooting Guard, with Gilbert Arenas and Jarvis Crittering. I can't get his last name, Jarvis, right? When they brought the guns into the Wizards locker room back in the early 2000s. And Arenas said one of the biggest things is, like, he was going to Arizona, picking up the guns, and going to DC, like basically transporting guns illegally. And that was the reason he got a 50-game suspension, not necessarily for bringing the guns and the supposed potential shootout that was going to happen there, right? And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, we can kind of justify the fact of you flew one lady from LA to New York or LA to Florida or wherever, and these things happen and they're claiming they happen. That's what they're trying to stick on. And I'm no attorney. I could just, from what I've seen on Law and Order and the rest of this shit, and understanding some of the law perspectives of, you know, how it gets put together in the committee and the bill process is like, damn, kind of crazy. However, don't come here looking for legal advice. Come here looking for political advice, right? It's totally different. But I do see how they will try to stick Diddy with that. And I think, you know, you paint that picture like, bro, you doing all this freaking nasty shit, getting escorts and everything else. And you got male producers saying you did it. Like, bro, it's crazy. But 3D, I agree with you. These rumors have been out about Diddy, about the entertainment industry for years. And it's really a fact of saying like, damn, we really let this happen? Like, who's sitting around here just letting men beat off on women and then and then hide the tape, and like, what are we doing? I guess that goes to the Drake part. I hate to bring Drake and Kendrick in. Like, yeah, if I was doing this, don't you think I'd get caught? Like, the people doing this shit who don't think they'll ever get caught until the tapes fucking show up on TMZ. Let's get back to this though.
Continue to fight for his freedom. You know,
hey, Isabel.
Painted the picture, and this was something we kind of got a glimpse of last week, where they were kind of painting the picture that these alleged victims in this case, including Cassie, including Jane Doe, were capable, strong women that were making adult choices. They were free choices, and they came with both the pros and the cons, and that essentially they were getting something out of Diddy, which was, you know, their rent was paid for, Cassie got a car from him, that type of thing. You know, and they said essentially that Diddy was a jealous man, but also that he, you know, that women were jealous of him too. And a lot of his relationships were driven off of jealousy, and that, again, Diddy was extremely jealous, and that, you know, the jealousy and the drugs they'll take responsibility for, you know, and he's not being charged with being a flawed person. Now, when it comes to Cassie specifically in the defense's opening, you know, they talked about how Cassie was in a relationship with another man when she had met Diddy, or that Diddy was in a relationship with Kim Porter until her death, which I thought was pretty particularly interesting, given that for the most part, you know, and, you know, I've seen this family like out on social media and that type of thing. And from my perspective, I always felt like Kim Porter and Diddy kind of gave off this notion that they were just co-parenting, that it was never that Kim Porter was still with Diddy while Cassie was with Diddy. I was expecting for them to talk about the 2022 BET award moment where Diddy had specifically mentioned Cassie, and that, talking about how Cassie had held him down and that type of thing, because from the defense's perspective, they were pretty much saying that Kim Porter was the love of Diddy's life, that once Cassie kind of knew that she'd never be Diddy's soulmate, that she would never be his wife, that type of thing, that's when she called off the relationship. And so that was a pretty interesting moment, or just interesting openings that, you know, some parts weren't kind of talked about necessarily. And then even when it comes with Jane Doe, you know, the defense says that Diddy and Jane Doe dated for 3 years. Their relationship was also plagued by jealousy. Jane wanted to be out in the public with Diddy, but for the most part, they kind of stayed inside. They were away from the public, and that's kind of where the issues kind of came about, is that Jane wanted to be public, like Diddy was with other women. You know, I can even point to Young Miami, for example, as somebody that Diddy was kind of public with and dating around that time. Same with Lori Harvey, that type of thing. But apparently Jane Doe was kind of in the background as a figure in all of this. And so pretty much another interesting part that the defense kind of talked about towards the end of their opening statements was that Cassie was having
big facts 3D
at the time that she had filed her civil lawsuit. They claimed that she had never gone to the police. Instead, she went to a civil lawyer to make money. You know, they talked about the claim that she had made a demand for $30 million, that type of thing. And so those were just some of the biggest moments. As far as defense openings go. As far as Mia is concerned, the defense was talking about how, you know, they had asked jurors to pretty much evaluate her motive as testifying, you know, because remember, she was an employee of Diddy's and that type of sort. And so, yeah, that was pretty much the biggest moments of the defense opening, as I kind of just like recap essentially all of it.
Yeah, that was a good recap of day one. I didn't get day one if you just tapping into the stream. So at least understanding the set off there, which is good. I know today there's been a Twitter account I've been following, P. Diddy trial updates, which is crazy. They're actually going through every question the AUSA and everything's going through today, right? Let me just try to make sure this looks good on the screen. All right, looks straight. This should be, I should give y'all a little more. Hold on, let me take my logo down and wait. Hold on, y'all. Yeah, let's get more in there. All right, so y'all can at least read through the tweets for what it is. And it's like 4 hours ago. So let's get through it for where it is. Ms. Shapiro, can you draft something on a piece of paper and instruction like to give? I got a zip file of text messages. We're reviewing them before raising it. Appreciate that. There was something I saw in here earlier. This is all looking like technical stuff before we get. So we have witness waiting in the back. Cassie Ventura enters. Welcome back. Cassie Ventura seated. Okay, what do you mean? This is. All right. Yesterday, Sean going armed to look for Suge Knight. Sean took guns with him. What? He was looking for Suge. We gotta go today too. I didn't know they were looking for Suge. Wait a minute. Told me to ask the escorts if they were cops. Yeah, am I saying I was not a cop? Sean told you to say that? Yes. What happened when you fought back? Object to speculation, overruled. How would Sean react if you fought back? Anger. Going to show LA in the Continental hallway again. Who entered Sean? Who was in his hand? He appeared to have anything. All right. I mean, I'm trying to get to the juicy stuff here, but this is 3 hours ago. So we'll get. We know when I saw this earlier before the stream, it was like 59 questions in. So it was something about the porno. I want to get to that because it was. I know everybody. I don't, but a lot of people film their episodes, like they porn episodes, right? And Diddy was having that on his phone as a celebrity. I think that really, they say, bothered her. Wait a minute. I don't think so. But you're right back. Plugging my phone and going a bit. Wait a minute. What? It was just left. Who was Jules and escort? Oh damn, they showing the escort pictures and all. And Uber on my phone. This is a little boring. I'll say that. Just to read it and not see it. You feel me? To read through that is kind of like blah versus me actually.
P. Diddy's trial is underway, but did the
hold on. Actually versus like seeing it. Like, I know it's a federal case. They can't have any cameras in the courtroom, but the tweeting it doesn't give the same effect because getting that third party piece, I want to see those answers live.
prosecution expose a weakness in their own case on day one? Did the defense reveal they may not really have a defense when it comes to one charge? And what can we glean from the legal strategies of both sides as we analyze the major arguments, statements, and evidence from the start of Sean Combs' criminal trial? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, so let me tell you what we're going to do here on Sidebar. Okay, so we're not only going to do daily recaps. Elizabeth Milner.
Full counsel, all that is good.
All right, opening statements. We know they're not evidence, but they are important, right?
Yes, yeah, they're really important. As you said, they're not evidence, but they didn't hold back. They struck
Jane, who we believe is now victim 2, into the...
Yeah, that doesn't look like the one I want to see. Where's the one from yesterday? I didn't get to day 2. So we got basically day 1.
Familiar?
Hold on.
Disgusting sex acts, a wild scene, and extreme violence. Day 2 of Sean Combs' criminal trial saw the beginning of the long-awaited testimony of Cassandra Ventura, the star witness of this case. We bring on Law and Crime reporter Elizabeth Milner, who is once again in the courtroom to give us a sense of what exactly happened today in court. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law and Crime legal alert. If you receive Depo-Provera birth control shots,
I told y'all the other day.
A brain or spinal tumor called 8.5 months pregnant, coming in after the testimony of 2 other witnesses. There is a lot to
Who
get
is
into.
calling me
We're going to
from
give you a
Tallahassee,
comprehensive
bro?
breakdown of every major moment from today's proceedings, because as you know, there are no cameras in that courtroom. There is no audio of what happened. But we got the next best thing. We got Law and Crimes reporter Elizabeth Milner, who was inside that courtroom witnessing firsthand everything that happened today. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. I know this has already been an exhausting day, particularly about what you heard in that courtroom. We will get to that. Before we even get into the testimony, real quick, is it just insane out there again? Are we seeing tons of people, reporters, spectators? Just tell us what the scene looks like right now.
The scene honestly kind of mirrored day one, which was opening statements. You know, day two was really no different. A lot of people trying to get inside that courthouse, a lot of people trying to get inside that courtroom, especially for the big testimony that we were all expecting today. Of course, that being Cassie Ventura taking the stand. And so it was a lot of people just trying to kind of weasel their way in through. I was able to get inside that courtroom really just with the luck and a prayer and also a little connections, which always helps in this case. But really, it's just madness over here at the courthouse. I mean, there's media campouts just extending across the block. A lot of public interest in this case as well, too.
You said life with parole, Ashley? Why so? Why life and parole instead of just life and no chance of parole, man?
From people who just either want to get a glimpse of either Diddy, his family, just be inside that courtroom, just be inside the courthouse, even if they're in the overflow room and able to kind of watch the proceedings that way. But there's definitely a lot of interest in the case, and I don't expect that to die down even throughout this week.
Oh yeah. I know what it is. I'm on your side. I don't think he should be free at all, right? I just didn't know if you were like nonchalant with it or like, hey, yeah, you know, whatever. I thought be done with it, like, yeah, you know, whatever. I didn't know if you were serious or like, Diddy, give him a slap on the wrist, put him in jail, but he'll get parole in 10 years and he'll be back out shaking on tour again.
No, and this was expected with Cassandra Ventura taking the stand. Now, before we get to her testimony, the day actually started with finishing up the testimony, the cross-examination of Daniel Phillip. That is that male escort, male performer, I should say, who began his testimony yesterday. Talked about how Diddy allegedly paid him to have sex with Cassandra Ventura, all while Diddy was not only watching but recording. And this happened to have, you know, apparently happened several times. Again, Combs is charged with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. So we're talking about coerced sexual performances. Key witness here. Elizabeth, what came out of cross-examination today of this witness?
Was he drunk? Daniel Phillip responded no. Was Cassie high? Daniel Phillip responded no. Did Cassie pay him or pay for a hotel? Daniel Phillip responded saying he just didn't know. You know, they were talking about the alleged assault that had happened at Cassie's apartment, something that Cassie herself had even testified about as well too. You know, and so essentially a lot of these questions back and forth were just pretty much to kind of get.
I don't know who's doing these caricatures. I really don't know. That's why I had this. I really don't know who's doing these caricatures. Do you think they're good? Do these images of Diddy? I'm not talking about the Cassie video, but these drawings. Do they give more professional or do they give more fair? I'm on borderline. The guy that had during jury selection, he was straight fair. But right now, this looks, he could be graying and we haven't seen Diddy public in a while, so he could be more gray than we realize, right? But I don't think they're giving him justice, because some of these guys, they need to find a new job.
Clarity. There were some points in the cross-examination I was kind of like, where is this going? But maybe from the defense's perspective, they were essentially trying to make that argument that Cassie she was coherent. She wasn't under the influence of any type of drugs or alcohol when these freak-offs were occurring, or when these encounters were occurring, I should say. What was interesting about
I agree with you, Ashley.
Courtroom, something that a lot of us in the press kind of noticed, is he walked inside with his sunglasses on, which, you know, for the most part, we haven't seen many witnesses do that. I mean, only 3 have taken the stand.
It's not an X-Men? brother, like he's drawn like he could be in the next Wakanda. Like it could be, you know how they do like the caricature, the sketchings before they do the scene. Like he would want you to stand here and this is how it's gonna look, type shit. When you see like the behind the scenes of a movie, where was bruh going?
So far, but it was definitely an interesting moment. I mean,
Where was Brad going?
Earlier this morning, it wasn't raining just yet, but it wasn't exactly sunny too. So we were kind of like, why is he wearing sunglasses? And even when he got off the witness stand, he put the sunglasses right back on, just walked out of the courtroom. But another interesting point, Jesse, that they were kind of talking about today was talking about an incident, or not even an incident per se, but talking about a moment in December of 2023. And this is when Xavier Donaldson brought up Daniel's friend named Malia. And essentially, they were questioned, or Daniel Phillip was questioned about when he saw Cassie outside of the Dream Hotel here in downtown New York City. Apparently, Daniel Phillip had told this friend Malia about his relationship, and I put that in quotations even here in my notes, about his relationship with Cassie. Said that Cassie asked to call him later on to meet her. The defense says it was for another experience, and Phillips said, no, that wasn't necessarily the case. The defense said, so Cassie called for a one-on-one after she wasn't with Diddy any longer. And so then another interesting point that was brought up was just that Daniel Phillip had met with federal prosecutors in March of just this year, so just a couple months back, and they were talking about essentially kind of what one thing I kind of remember from Daniel Phillip's testimony is just kind of the way he would talk about Cassie per se. Like, for example, yesterday he had said that Cassie was one of the most beautiful women that he had ever seen. He had also said had Cassie given him a chance that he would absolutely date her. So it seems like he kind of had more on his end, more of a platonic.
Hold on, I'm just pause this here because this is very interesting. This is from yesterday's trial. But I want to flip over to the HHS committee because we have RFK testifying before committee today, and really switching over because Bernie Sanders is questioning him. So at least getting a little politics in. Let's see what Uncle Bern has to say to RFK.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary, thanks for being with us. Let me begin by quoting a sentence that came from your prepared remark. Every other major country on earth does and recognize that healthcare is a human right guaranteed to every man, woman, and child. Maybe we understand that the function of a rational healthcare system is not to make hundreds of billions of dollars in profit for insurance companies and drug companies who often engage in stock buybacks, pay their CEOs outrageous compensation packages. There was a guy from one of the major drug companies sitting exactly where you are sitting. Last year, a guy makes $50 million a year. Meanwhile, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough dentists, we don't have enough pharmacists, we don't have enough healthcare workers in general. You are right. The system is structurally broken. We spend far more. We have a shorter life expectancy than other countries. So this is an issue that I want to address with you. How, in fact, do we guarantee health care to all people and do it in an effective way? Let me say a word about prescription drugs. You and President Trump had a press conference earlier this week discussing an executive order that both of you claimed would make sure that the American people pay the lowest prices in the world for prescription drugs, not the highest. As you mentioned at your press conference, this is a concept that I personally strongly support. I think you are aware of that. But as President Trump and you should know, this executive order, like Trump's previous executive orders on the subject, will likely be thrown out by the courts, and we will be back to exactly where we are today, paying by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs.
Sorry about the echo on there, y'all.
In my view, the way forward is through
Got a little excited and turned Bernie up too high.
So, if you and President Trump are serious about significantly lowering the outrageous price of prescription drugs in this country, as I hope you are, I would very much appreciate both of you working with me and other people on this committee and in the Senate on legislation that I will soon be introducing, which accomplishes exactly the same goal as you and the President talked about, making sure that we pay no more for prescription drugs than people in other major countries. So if we are serious about that, let's work together and let's make that happen. And in fact, if Republicans and Democrats come together on this, if we prioritize it, we can pass that legislation in a couple of weeks. Thirdly, Secretary Kennedy, all of us want to make the government more efficient and cost-effective, and few would deny that there is too much bureaucracy. But let me tell you also what we want and what the American people want. And that is, we want the federal government to play a major role in continuing its efforts to combat such terrible diseases as cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other terrible illnesses that claim the lives of millions of Americans. In that regard, I must tell you that I have heard from
Senator Sanders, I'll be honest, bro. It's been probably 21 years of the same speech. 21 years of the same thing. I get it. Vermont's different from the rest of the world. The rest of America, at least, right? But, bruh, you haven't passed none of this shit that you've been talking about for 20-something years? You've been in Congress longer than that, right? But Bernie, you haven't passed, like, everything he complains about, I hate to say, is the same old from yesterday. It almost gets old. Like I said on yesterday's stream, previous stream, it's like, there's always this notion of healthcare is universal right for all. You can have your opinion about that, cool. Then there's a notion of living wage, which never really transports into any physical dollar, right? Or like fiscal dollar, whatever you want to say. Case in point. So in Florida, I'm in Florida. Governor DeSantis is telling the Florida legislature, hey, we need to reduce property taxes, right? Ad valorem taxes are the biggest thing people are paying. Their house prices skyrocketed. They're paying more in property tax. We need to cut it. Cool. The House legislature goes, Florida House goes, say, you know what? Some cities and counties, 90% of their budget is property taxes because they're rural. Then you have some urban communities where like 25% of their budget is property taxes. Make it happen, right? But then you're not coming to a solution with it. You're not bringing anything to the table to bring a solution to none of this shit. It's just a complaint. Hey, do this, do this, do this. And Bernie, it's the same thing. It's like, you are elected to make the change. It can't just be, oh, Republicans and Democrats have to come together because Democrats just had control of this shit, didn't they? And when y'all had control of it, even with the House, y'all didn't find a middle ground compromise. You're just saying, hey, living wage, give people a living wage. Well, what the fuck is a living wage? I think we calculated the other day roughly $40,000 a year. Does $40,000 a year enough? And is that a living wage? If you live in Mobile, Alabama, it could be. But if I'm living in New York, no. Living in Florida, no. But let's get back to Bernie, man. Appreciate y'all tapping in.
Patients and doctors in Vermont and all over this country who are deeply concerned that under the leadership of you and Mr. Musk, the Trump administration has terminated at least $13.5 billion in healthcare funding, including more than 1,600 grants to conduct vital research into cancer prevention, Alzheimer's, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, among many other medical research investments. In the first 3 months of this year, the National Institute of Health has been effectively cut by $2.7 billion, a 35% cut, reversing over a decade of investment in medical.
I do think you need to pay attention to the environment, but then everything can't be racism. I hate to say that to be real with you, right? Everything in life, especially with black folks, can't be racism. Some of it, respectfully, is like, you know what? We're still focused like it's still Jim Crow South, like it's still, we can't drink at the water fountain, a lot of these things, right? To be respectful. I've never seen nobody lynched in my entire life. Now, I've seen some people unalived online, police brutality, maybe a random shooting, right? Gang violence happens. But we can't make everything racism. Some things are blatant racism. Yes, call it for what it is, but everything can't be that, because a lot of it is, okay, we need somebody to be involved. We need somebody to talk politics. We need somebody to teach the kids. We need somebody to have a business in the community to make sure that we have fresh fruits and vegetables. Sometimes it's about just doing more than just complaining and blaming racism for it all. Just like I didn't support CRT, right? I didn't support CRT because I looked at it like, damn, CRT is telling that every white person, good or bad, indifferent, is a racist. That their grandparent was racist. Their granddaddy probably was. They're not portraying that, but I know that if Drake comes on, they're going to say the N-word. Because guess what? We've made it okay. But just because you're saying Drake one day, and you know what? You may say, all right, cool, honky, cracker, I'm going to say it back to you. But I can't just automatically say, you know what, you have one wrong thing, you're racist. I don't believe it, because I think, honestly, a lot of black folks, respectfully, who know that white people say this shit and other races and cultures say this shit. We just get offended when it gets out there for the public to know. And then we get mad when they sit there and get doxxed and raise $250,000 out the blue to support their family. And it's like, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. Some of it is racist, some of it's not. Some of the shit, respectfully, we be racist towards our own people sometimes. But that's a whole other conversation. Let's get back to Bernie, man. Appreciate y'all tapping in.
Medical research.
Why are you willing to be treated as less than? Who's being treated as less than, Kevin? Who's being treated, in what respect am I being treated as less than, and by who? Tell me that in the chat. Appreciate you. Let me know.
Leadership, cancer research has been slashed by.
Why is that your standard? Do you really think the laws are supportive of white supremacy by accident? No. See, I appreciate you, Kevin. No, I don't think the laws are, what are you saying, supportive of white supremacy by accident. What I'm telling you is, Hampton Road, VA, that's what's up, brother. I'll say this. What laws in your state are impacting you the most where you just feel like they're super racist? So you know what? They still have Confederacy they're supporting. Is it laws to make sundown towns there? Do they have laws to basically say that you can't read, write, and all the rest of the shit? Is it still on the books? It used to be. There's a part of saying, okay, cool, these laws were on the books, but now we got to get some of these laws off the books. Cool. You can have that perspective. You can also say, all right, cool, what can I do to change these laws, to improve the quality of life in my community? I can't do everything. I can't worry about the brownfields and education. I can't worry about economic development and the arts and sports. I got to pick one. So it's not about supporting white supremacy. I believe in being involved in the process. I'm a lobbyist. I never wanted to be in politics. My mindset is, okay, cool. If we want to change this white supremacist system, we need to be able to change the laws, because right now we're not able to change the laws because you don't even probably understand how the law system is structured in your state, in your city, in your county, right? And I'll just assume that, right? Because most people don't. Most people realize politics is boring. It's only the hot button issues that are fun. But so it's not being less than by trying to work within the system to change the structure of the system. To me, it's being less than by just complaining and protesting about the system without a clear strategy or plan on how to change it, right? If they're going after election laws, voter ID laws, all right, cool. It's more than just registering more people to vote, because we register people to vote and they haven't voted. Why haven't they voted? Because we haven't talked to the issues they care about. And all of a sudden, you're going to sit here and they're not voting and all this other shit and just call everything racist and white supremacy and supporting the white supremacist system. This is the fucking system they created that we're born in. And we've never, as a cultural society, black people with urban culture, whatever they want to label it as, thugs, right? We've never had a real chance to say, you know what? Let's elect our people and let's go with a real strategy and let's get some shit done. Because you know what happens? We talk about reparations. What is reparations? 40 acres and a mule. Do you know how to farm? Do you know how to raise a mule? Or will you get arrested for animal cruelty if that mule is outside and damn dying outside and shit, right? Let's be real. Half the stuff we complain about, we don't want to actually put together to fix. We just want to complain about the shit and call it racist. But half the shit ain't racist. Half the shit is you don't even know what the fuck's going on for real. And that's the only caveat you have to make sure that you're heard. Everything's not racist. I can tell you what's racist. And I'm quite sure you've never been called a nigga. And nobody's ever broken your house and raped your mom or your wife because they were the Klansmen and all the rest of that shit. We don't live in that lifestyle. Stop trying to claim that other shit, man. We pass that.
Undermine the vital role vaccines play.
Sorry if I rambled there too.
Disease during the single largest measles outbreak in 25 years.
All right, Kevin, I'm dedicated this to you. I'm not being facetious. Today, people want reparations until you talk about ADOS, American descendants of slaves, right? Kevin, I appreciate you. You're going to make me sidetrack for a second. But to me, reparations today will be, okay, cool. How can we make sure if they're doing AI technology, how can we make sure that our kids are getting the math pathways and the structure that they need in kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, and high school, so they can be the next engineers and make six figures, maybe do cybersecurity, IT plus, maybe create the next app, not just a Facebook, create the next app that's going to make them a millionaire, billionaire, so they can reinvest in the community. To me, that's what it is. They talk about the tech hub, Silicon Valley, and all these the tech things, all the discrepancies that they have regarding DEI or diversity and inclusion or black people of color in this society. Reparations will be making sure that we're there. But it goes back to this. You got to have the people that care about the real shit and not just placating the bullshit by protesting. Poverty pimping, as I like to call it. Because reparations to me isn't 40 acres and a mule. It's adjusting to where we are right now through the Department of Education and magnet schools. Your bar is too low, man. How you figure? How you figure my bar is too low? I appreciate you, Kevin. I appreciate you tapping for the streaming through the Department of Education and magnet schools. Public education. The public education that they're looking to defund, right? The public education, Kevin, you're a black man in the world, so I know you care about our kids' education. You're on my stream today, so I know you care, right? What does it take to open a school in your community? Did they ban African-American history in your schools or your communities and ban books and all the rest of this shit? I think they may have probably did. Virginia's maybe more liberal. Maybe they didn't, right? Maybe we should go start educating our kids instead of just leaving it to the public schools and the magnet schools and everything else. I was fortunate enough to go to public school, charter school, private school. My mother was not well-to-do, but she made sure I had the rubric and the curriculum I needed to matriculate and be successful, right? I think we need to take ownership instead of just throwing money in issues at the Department of Education. If they're making it, I said it before, Oklahoma, Arkansas, you can read through it. Oklahoma said, Supreme Court justice in their state, if you give parents the ESA, educational savings account for their student, that's not public money going to private schools. They're looking for ways to defund private schools. Our narrative is we need to fund the private schools. Well, guess what? The segregated schools from the 60s and 70s were the same schools that were like crumbling roads and bridges, not roads, but buildings. And the old schools, the segregated schools are the ones that a lot of states are closing down. You know why? Because they never invested in those schools in the first place. The infrastructure, it costs more to maintain that old infrastructure than building a new one, right? On top of it, there's nobody owning on the private side of the charter school side to say, you know what, hey, let's take an effort to go educate our damn kids. And that ends up being an issue. You're not involved. You want the public school system to just, hey, I'm going to send my kid to the public school. They need to come back. You never actually been in the public school system. You don't know that in 5th grade, middle school, high school, in 5th grade, actually, these kids be smoking weed coming to school high. Not just in my city, not just in Florida, throughout the damn country. Go talk to a teacher. Dallas, Atlanta, Virginia. Go talk to a teacher and ask them, okay, cool. How are your kids? Are your kids coming to school just hungry? No, not just hungry. Shit, their daddy's a dope boy. Their daddy, the biggest dope boy in the city. He's basically coming to school in 5th grade smelling like weed every day. In middle school, fucking, doing vapes, not even being able to read. Some of these kids were at home during the pandemic and they lost 2 or 3 years worth of school. And guess what? They just graduated high school this year, right? Do you think they're prepared for college? Do you think that they have parents that are sitting here being able to educate them and work with them to make sure that they're rubric and their career? Like, come on, bro. Like, I hate to go on a tangent because I did go on a ramble in different stages here. I appreciate y'all tapping in regardless, but it's more than racism. It's more than Department of Education and magnet schools. It's like, bro, you got to be invested. Kevin, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you this and put it in the chat, please. How much is the per pupil funding for students in your state? Like, the question to the point, how much tax dollars in Virginia do they allocate for students to be educated in your state? I'm going to tell you now, if you don't know the answer, you're part of the problem, bro. That's all I'm going to say. If you don't know the answer to how much your state, whether you're in Virginia, Georgia, New York, California, if you don't know how much your state is allocating per pupil, per child, you can't tell me shit about no education, brother. You can't tell me shit about what we should be doing, whether magnet school, public school, and racism, because guess what? You don't know the basics of politics. Because the basics of it is every law that gets put in place has a dollar figure to it. That's why you can't just go pass laws to say, hey, we're going to, like we did in Florida, we're going to remove stand your ground laws. We're going to repeal them after Trayvon Martin. You know why? Because you have a castle doctrine. Because the Florida law basically said that if somebody broke into your house and you killed them to protect your house, you would have to pull them outside in the driveway before the police got there in order to not be charged with murder. And that was the castle doctrine. So you could basically stand your ground in your home. That's the basics of it. So when they had Trayvon Martin died, and a good friend of mine, former Representative Alan Williams, filed a bill to repeal stand your ground, the issue wasn't Trayvon Martin. It was a fact of, that's a blatant lie. You don't know shit, right? Who's that? Lovey, appreciate you for dropping that in. $9,600 per pupil. Somebody who's educated, right? The castle doctrine basically is the reason that Republicans fought in Florida to say, you know what? This is stand your ground. And I'm going to tell you this, Kevin, to be real, because you don't know shit. There's a gentleman I used to work with, Congressman Al Lawson. If you want to be real, Google it. Google hip hop lobbyist Al Lawson. The congressman hired me to run this campaign. The congressman was attacked by Democrats for supporting the stand your ground law. And his issue was at the time, guess what? Somebody broke into his house and assaulted his wife. Not sexually assaulted, but battery. And he wished he would have been there to protect his wife at the time, right? He shared this, it's a public story, right? So I'm just laying it out there, right? You talking duty to retreat. No, I'm talking about the structure of how the law got together. So Al Lawson voted for the bill, and we caught help from him from Democrats. And it was the fact of like, listen, if your house is broken into and you had to protect your wife, and they created a law to basically expand the castle doctrine so that you can stand your ground, would you support it? Yes. That was different from George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, because that was a spin on the narrative in the media, right? So all that put together, that's why, hold on, my point was you can't just change the law. It's fiscal, it's some money to it, right? So if you go say, okay, cool, I'm going to repeal the stand your ground law, what's the cost of that? There could be a fiscal cost to any particular law that you want to create. Say, you know what, in order to provide tax relief for any veteran so that they don't have to pay any kind of taxes in the state of Florida, I really noticed that would be like $30 million, right? If they can't afford that, they're not going to put it in law, right? Okay, cool. For this, how can you afford to tell people that if they kill somebody in their home or they're not allowed to stand your ground, right? It is what it is. Zimmerman started the fight and claimed the ground he was losing. Right, Kevin, but I'm talking about, you're talking about Zimmerman's defense. I'm talking about how the law was created and the debate around the law itself, which is different. The courtroom and the legislative committee room, 212 not in the Florida's legislature, that's where this was debated. That's where Jordan Davis's mother, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, came in and testified about her son dying. And basically saying, you know what, there was no stand your ground law for that, but she wanted to come testify about it, bro. I'm not going to debate with somebody who don't know. But I appreciate you being here, all right? Let me get back to Bernie.
Which has led to over 1,000 cases.
Let me Google castle doctrine, then Google hip hop lobbyist Al Lawson, and we can have a conversation. And Google stand your ground law. And then if you want to, just go back to the bill that Alan Williams filed, State Representative Alan Williams filed about the stand your ground repeal. And if you want to, go to the Florida channel and watch that entire 3-hour committee meeting, because Matt Gaetz was the chairman of that committee. I was there.
125 hospitalizations and 3 deaths. And let me say a word about USAID. Elon Musk, the richest man on earth, who has led the effort to cut health and nutrition programs for the poorest people on earth, has absurdly suggested that no one, quote unquote, no one, has died from the massive cuts to USAID. Mr. Musk is 100% wrong. According to independent researchers, nearly
I gotta get the charger for my this charger gonna work.
Throughout the world as a result of the massive
The laptop about to die, but we're gonna be good.
malaria,
Damn, you're wrong. Castle doctrine acceptance of duty to retreat.
and other serious diseases. Further, as a result of the elimination of U.S. funding for a global vaccine program, it has been estimated
Kevin.
that over 1 million children will die because the cuts that will
Look
save
up Florida Stand Your
taxpayers
Ground law,
very,
brother.
very little money. So let me just conclude by saying this.
I know I'm not
The
wrong.
United
I was
States
there,
of
brother.
America is the wealthiest country on earth. We
That's been
should
the
have
argument
the
about stand your
best
ground.
healthcare
I
system
appreciate you
in
being
the
able to do it,
world,
though.
not one of the worst. Given our purchasing power, we should be paying the lowest prices on earth for prescription drugs, not the highest. Instead of giving hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the richest people in this country, we should be proudly investing in coming up with cures for cancer, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, and other terrible illnesses. That is what we should be doing. But I am afraid that in too many ways, we are doing exactly the opposite. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. I'll now introduce the witness. We're joined today by the Honorable Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., the 26th Secretary of the United States Department of Health and Human Services. In his role as Secretary, Mr. Kennedy is responsible for overseeing the nation's civilian federal health agencies, which serve over 150 million Americans. We look forward to hearing from you today. Secretary Kennedy, again, thank you for joining us.
And thank you, Senator Sanders. I just want to begin by saying I know how determined President Trump is for us to have the lowest drug prices in the world, as between Europe and the United States. And I also know that he doesn't care how we get there. That's where he wants Americans to be. And he said, I don't know how many times since, I've been involved with him, but that we shouldn't be.
My bad, Dante. I'm just seeing your comment. Today's topic, I'm just watching through the Diddy trial, some of this RFK testimony. I could have him see a little behind on that. This RFK testimony in Congress today. Kevin came in talking about, different things, change the subject. It's all right. But to the point, I'm going to pull this up because I have it here. In Florida, I guess I could just, let me copy this link over and get it over here so y'all could see. Let me pause. Doctrine. To all locations, when a person has a right to be, where a person has a right to be, while the Castle Doctrine originally applied to only one's home, the Stand Your Ground law removes the duty to retreat and allows individuals to use deadly force if they reasonably believe it is necessary to defend themselves or others against imminent danger. That is what I'm discussing. That bill that former Congressman Al Lawson voted on. That's what it is. So all that put together that Kevin's talking about with Castle Doctrine, that's nice. I appreciate y'all tapping in. But let's get back to the main point for this part. And it wasn't to be right. It was basically let them know, my laws in Florida may be different from your laws in Virginia. But I'm clarifying what the 2005 law was and what Alan Williams did, former Representative Alan Williams did after the Trayvon Martin situation. Based on the Stand Your Ground law, because if it repealed, let's go back to this. If Alan Williams' law, which was after the Trayvon Martin situation, if it would have repealed Stand Your Ground based on the 2005 law, it would have repealed the Castle Doctrine. It was all grouped together. That's why I'm saying there's got to be a point of, if we're talking about everything being racist, everything in the black culture, being there politically, let's be involved and actually understand what we're talking about. So if you bring Stand Your Ground into it, like you brought education in, magnet schools, everything else, cool. I'm not disagreeing with, I'm not all end all being super right. What I'm saying is at least be knowledgeable about what the fuck we're doing. You got to have a plan. So if you're planning to say, okay, cool, it's Castle Doctrine, to stand you wrong, dead ass wrong. Okay, cool. Based on Florida's law, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm wrong in the chat. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, y'all gonna sit here and subscribe anyway. So make sure you like and subscribe. I am the Hip Hop Lobbyist. Let's get back to this RFK testimony. We'll get into the formalities later.
To present the Department of Health and Human Services fiscal year 2026 budget, debilitating disease, contaminated food, toxic environments, addiction, and mental illness affect Americans across every race, class, and political belief. When my team and I took the helm at HHS, we set out with clear goals. First,
you, Robert.
To make America healthy again with a special focus on the chronic disease epidemic. Second, we committed to delivering more efficient, responsive, and effective service to over 100 million Americans who rely on
my man Rob. Appreciate you, brother.
And other programs. Third, we focus on achieving these goals while cutting costs for taxpayers. We intend to do more, a lot more, with less. The budget I'm presenting today supports these goals and reflects.
Oh, wow. They was ready for his ass.
The witness will suspend. The committee will come to order. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
Boy, they was on.
Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be tolerated. Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its
Hey, y'all
business.
seen-
Capitol Police are asked to remove.
Y'all see these brothers right here? Brother stood up quick, boy. Hey, that's security right there. I don't care what y'all say about Republicans. When they want to be protected, they gonna find some brothers. They gonna find some brothers. Hey, man, I appreciate you, Robert.
As the budget,
Just a second, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Secretary, let's get the doors closed and the ruckus.
Look at these
is
brothers
over.
back there holding it down. Like the stream chat. Dante, appreciate that.
Got it. Okay, and we thank the Capitol Police for working with due diligence. Thank you very much. Mr.
I ain't fucking off after January 6th, boy.
the budget I'm
Excuse me, Mr.
presenting.
Secretary, will you
Sorry.
reset the clock? The clock's been running. Whatever it would be. Okay, please.
The budget I'm presenting today supports those goals and reflects two enduring American values: compassion and responsibility. I invite the committee to unite around these ideals with me.
Hey, Leonard.
The United States remains the sickest developed nation in the world, and we spend $4.5 trillion annually on health care, 2 to 3 times more per capita than comparable nations. Clearly, something is structurally and systemically wrong with this system. Furthermore, healthcare costs are steadily increasing at a rate of 2% greater than the economy. If we don't staunch this unsustainable hemorrhage, we will ransom our children to bankruptcy, servitude, and disastrous health consequences. Yes, an exploding debt is a social determinant of health. We won't solve this problem by throwing more money at it. We must spend smarter. We will shift funding away from bureaucracy and toward direct impact. Some things at HHS will not change. We will preserve legacy programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Head Start as the foundation of the MAHA agenda. Vulnerable populations, seniors, and veterans deserve consistent access to care, and I will ensure that they receive it. Today, 83 million Americans, urban and rural, lack adequate access to primary care physicians.
I'm gonna step away for a second. I'm gonna leave RFK on, y'all. Make sure y'all tap into the stream. More than anything, if it's your first time here, let me put my face back on. If it's your first time here,
Operations.
please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I am your boy, the hip hop lobbyist. I'm a lobbyist in Florida, actually, but I do a little DC work every now and then. But either way, please make sure you tap to the stream. Leonard, I appreciate you tapping in. Is Kevin still here? Kevin, let me know if the Castle doctrine was actually right this time. I'm gonna go back to RFK. Like Robert said, let's get back to it.
First, we will consolidate programs to better tackle mental health and addiction. These issues now rival chronic disease in their impact. HHS will aggressively combat the opioid crisis, especially the spread of synthetic drugs like fentanyl. We will empower state, local, and tribal leaders to create effective solutions. Second, we will address nutrition, physical activity, and healthy lifestyles. The president's budget requests $94 billion in discretionary funds to support these priorities, including the Administration for a Healthy America. We will emphasize healthy eating and Head Start and ensure the program continues to serve its 750,000 children and parents effectively. Third, we will equip FDA to expand its food safety efforts through research, regulation, inspection, and education remove harmful chemicals from food and packaging. Fourth, we will find cutting-edge research at NIH while cutting risky or non-essential studies. That includes ending gain-of-function experiments and research based upon radical gender ideologies. At the CDC, we will return to core missions, tracking disease, investigating outbreaks, and sustaining public health infrastructure while cutting waste. Fifth, we will eliminate DEI funding and redirect resources toward real poverty reduction. We will move beyond lip service to communities of color and take meaningful action to meet their needs. Six, we will strengthen cybersecurity and health IT. The AI revolution has arrived, and we are already using new technology to manage health data more efficiently and securely. Finally, we will rebuild public trust, a trust that eroded through years of industry capture, corruption, waste, and misplaced priorities. We will launch a new era of transparency in public service, creating an honest, science-driven HHS that answers to the President, to Congress, and to the American people. I look forward to working with Congress to pursue this mission together as a bipartisan cause. Let's work side by side to make America healthy again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'll start with questions. Mr. Secretary, I appreciate that NIH wants to recalibrate its research portfolio to address conditions not previously attended to sufficiently. Nutrition, conditions such as arise after viral infection like myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. But this is happening in tandem with reports that HHS is closing the Office for Long COVID Research and Practice. And I talk to people for whom long COVID is seriously impacting their life. So to what extent will HHS continue to support research, data collection, and other programs focused on understanding ongoing health impacts of long COVID?
Senator, I am 100% committed to finding treatments for long COVID. I'm deeply involved in that personally. I have a son who is really dramatically affected by long COVID. I have many, many friends who are affected by that and by Lyme disease, incidentally, which we also is also a priority. The COVID office was cut by an executive order from the White House, but everybody at NIH and at CDC is committed to these kind of studies, and I can tell you personally, I will make sure that they happen.
Thank you. The NIH is the largest public funder of biomedical research in the world, giving us an edge over countries like China, with whom we are obviously a geopolitical rival. But it takes a long time to develop this. And the rising prevalence of neurodegenerative disease is one area in which we have an impending crisis if we don't support the research and advanced cures. And my concern, and now I'll speak as a guy from Louisiana, if NIH funding is substantially reduced, they have folks at my universities, at Tulane and LSU, who are doing work on these sorts of things. So knowing that the NIH budget is getting squeezed and the indirect costs likewise, how will the NIH successfully do more with less? How will we build those new scientists to find these cures and to compete with geopolitical rivals?
Well, for one thing, Senator Cassie, you're talking about neurodegenerative disease now.
For example, ALS or Alzheimer's.
ALS, right? The Chinese are not spending a lot of money on DEI, and and we are cutting those studies. We're cutting studies on gain of function studies, and we're cutting grants to foreign scientists from adversarial countries, and particularly the Chinese, which have the 1,000 Talents program, which is openly trying to exploit U.S. research and take our IP. We spend more than any country in the world on biomedical research. NIH controls about 70% of the global funding for biomedical research. The cuts we have made to date our cuts, our administrative cuts, as far as I know, we have not fired any working scientists. Of the working scientists, the people who are actually doing scientists, there are some people who are scientists that were doing IT or administration, but in terms of who did lose their jobs. But in terms of working scientists, our policy was to make sure none of them were lost and that research continues.
Let me, thank you. Let me ask you, the budget proposes to eliminate several large block grants for hospital and health department emergency preparedness and other core public health capabilities, explaining that states are better equipped to fund these activities. Now, I agree that frontline public health happens at the local level, but what works well in, say, Louisiana may not work well in a state like New York. But rural, under-resourced states especially rely upon federal funding to support public health. How do you propose we balance competing interests, returning power to states, because there is a difference in how different states do it, but replace the funding necessary to combat these public health problems?
Well, I think it's a balance, Mr. Chairman. And we have a legal obligation, CDC has a legal obligation to do national pandemic response, and we will meet that obligation. And in fact, we are going to improve it, and particularly if we can get support from this body to refund, reappropriate the pop-up, which is critical for our pandemic response. But there are some functions that are local in nature, and in those cases, we will be supporting local infrastructure to respond. They know better than we know, and we saw this during some of the hurricane response with, Governor DeSantis' response, which was really Florida localized. There was no deaths and very little destruction to a hurricane that was as bad as the one that followed that relied on federal response and was really a catastrophe for the state. So I think experience shows that the localities can often do better with some functions, particularly with the hospitals and infrastructure. But we are not relinquishing our responsibility at CDC to manage national emergencies.
Thank you. Senator Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me stop going back to prescription drugs. Mr. Secretary, did I hear you correctly to state that your goal is to have Americans pay the lowest prices in the world or equivalent to what is paid in other major countries? That is my goal. That you are prepared to work with us on legislation to achieve that goal?
Absolutely.
All right, and I believe there's bipartisan support for it. I believe that if the leadership here prioritizes that, we can do that in a very short period of time. Look forward to that. Let me ask you this, as Secretary of HHS. We have in America today some 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. We spend more per capita, as you've indicated, than any other country. Is healthcare a human right? Are we making America healthy when so many people cannot afford to go to a doctor, when 68,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor when they should? Is healthcare a human right? Will you work with us to guarantee healthcare to every man, woman, and child in America?
Well, I think you're asking two different questions. You're asking a philosophical question about whether it is a human right, like a constitutional right. As an attorney, I would say that it's not a right of a kind that we otherwise enshrine in the Constitution, because healthcare costs your neighbor money. If I smoke cigarettes for 20 years, I make that choice, which is my choice.
I don't mean to, I don't have a lot of time, so but I am here.
If you're asking me a philosophical question, I gotta, give you a thoughtful answer.
Within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
So, it's not like freedom of speech, which costs, everybody.
But every other country, Mr. Secretary, every other country guarantees health care to all people as a right. Should we, as Americans?
The objective is to get Americans the level of health care that they want, the choice which Americans want. Americans
They don't want the
get-
choice to be uninsured.
Well, but
They don't want the choice to die because they don't get to a doctor on time.
Americans prefer private insurance to other insurance sources.
Do you
So-
believe, okay,
And what I would say is, you know, I want to find a solution to this. I want every American to have insurance. President Trump wants every American to be insured and have access to health care. The question is, how do we get there? Obamacare is not working. It is not working. And this is the,
okay, sorry to interrupt you. All right. The reconciliation.
my job is to try to make it work.
All right, I have limited time. The reconciliation bill that is now being worked on in the House will come to the Senate. As it stands right now, cuts Medicaid in the Affordable Care Act by more than $715 billion, which the CBO has estimated would eliminate health insurance for 13.7 off of the health care they have, poor and working class people, keeping America healthy.
Well, I haven't seen that number. I've seen the number 8 million. And here the people, the cuts are not true cuts. The cuts are eliminations of waste, abuse, and fraud. And I can go through. I can go through the people who will lose it. There are a million people,
I really don't mean to be rude, but as you know, I have a very limited amount of time.
You asked the question, I'm going to answer it.
Well, yeah, I've got a bunch of questions that I would like you to answer as well. All right, we talk about austerity, doing more with less, but in that very same bill that is being worked on in the House right now, there are $235 billion in tax breaks for the top 0.2%. Do you think that makes sense when that same bill would throw 13 million people off of Medicaid? Should we give tax breaks to billionaires and throw kids and others off of Medicaid?
You're conflating the congressional bills with the proposals from the president. The president
No, I'm talking
is
about
not
the
making
congressional
any-
bill. I'm talking about the bill, the reconciliation bill.
I mean, the president is not trying to do tax cuts for billionaires. He's trying to have no tax on tips and no tax for overtime.
$235 billion by through
How
the
many
estate
people,
tax.
how many billionaires do you know that are making overtime or making any part of the tips?
$235 billion. Look, it's a big bill. There are a lot of provisions in it, but you cannot deny
Congressional bill.
the top 0.2% will get $235 billion in tax breaks while we cut Medicaid.
Senator Paul.
Thank you. I want to commend Secretary Kennedy and the administration for putting forward less spending. And one of the reasons I think we need to look at NIH and other grant-making organizations is if you keep giving them the same amount, you'll keep getting the same frivolous grants. And I'll recite a couple of them so people can remember. $660,000 was given to study the impact of microaggressions on obesity-related eating in Latinx Americans. You know, really, maybe heart disease, diabetes, obesity, but eating disorders in Latinx Americans. Here's another one, $419,000 to study if lonely rats seek cocaine more than happy rats. Maybe we could eliminate that, and that could go to a real disease. Most recently, NIH recorded a $620,000 grant for LGBTQ plus inclusive teen pregnancy prevention program for transgender boys. And what they discovered was that girls who think they are boys are at least as likely to get pregnant as girls who think they are girls. Amazing, the science. But we should all agree that that's just left-wing ideology. That's not science. We should study obesity and cancer and diabetes. I commend you for shifting the balance. I have a specific question about closing down Fort Detrick recently. My understanding is that a contractor intentionally slashed the hazmat suit or the biosafety suit of someone who's handling Ebola. You were immediately attacked in the press by saying it was just anti-science, once and then shutting down science. Was this a serious breach, and is it being investigated?
We brought in the FBI to investigate it. As you say, it appears like it was a deliberate criminal act to try to, that is equivalent to attempted murder because the kind of microbe, the pathogens that they were handling have a very, very high case fatality rate, up to 50%. The disturbing thing about it is that there are 3 leaks a week globally from BSL-4 labs. And any of those could be cataclysmic for humanity. And as a result, we not only closed Fort Detrick and we brought the FBI in to investigate that, we also declared the end of gain-of-function studies that will allow those kind of leaks to continue.
I commend you for that. I think ultimately legislation will be needed because the next administration could reverse it. I think there is bipartisan support for some controls on gain of function. As you shut down gain of function, though, you have to decide what it is and then you have to look for it. So I would suggest that at both Fort Detrick and at the NBAC lab that's nearby, run by the DHS, that we look at experiments involving Ebola, avian flu, Marburg virus, to determine, one, whether they gain of function, but also just determine whether the experiments are wise. I am told in public records that they are doing experiments or have done experiments to aerosolize Ebola at the NBAC lab. That's the DHS lab nearby to Fort Detrick. My hope is that when you investigate whether to do gain of function or what is gain of function, what is being done, that you'll compile that and at least give us a report in Congress, and we're going to ask for it, but so there can be public scrutiny of these things. You will help to scrutinize it, but the whole public needs to know how dangerous some of these things are and whether we should be doing them. The idea of aerosolizing Ebola, I think, is, or training Ebola to be aerosolized is incredibly dangerous, probably goes against the Biological Weapons Convention, and I'd like to hear a little bit about whether or not, as you investigate this, you plan on bringing information back to Congress or to the public.
Yeah, we're going to be absolutely transparent. I have a trip planned to Fort Detrick with Kristi Noem, who's the director of DHS, and with Jay Bhattacharya and other people in my agency who are experts on bioweapons, who are experts on gain-of-function research, and we are going to be absolutely transparent. We've also proposed a methodology for regulating and for determining what is dangerous gain of function and what is legitimate scientific investigation, and how to bring the public into that debate, which I think, as you point out, is absolutely critical. That is where we messed up last time. And as you know, we have some of the Democrats here who are, talking about the great science from NIH, but now we have a major agency, intelligence agency, the CIA, the FBI, the DOE, and the State Department have all agreed that NIH research almost certainly led to the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So that's not the kind of the result that we should be allowing or enabling, and we're going to end that now.
If possible, the trip to Fort Detrick and to NBAC, we'd like to be included or invited on that trip if possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, one of my constituents, her name's Natalie Phelps. She's a mom of 2 from Bainbridge Island in Washington State. She has been fighting aggressive stage 4 colorectal cancer for nearly 5 years now. Her best hope now is a clinical trial she's participating in at the NIH Clinical Center. She flew out to NIH a few weeks ago for her first appointment, and her care team there wanted her to come back in 4 weeks to start treatment. But because of the thoughtless mass firing of thousands of critical employees across NIH and HHS that you carried out, Natalie's doctors at that clinical center have told her they have no choice but to delay her treatment by an additional 4 weeks. Now, an extra 4 weeks may not sound like a long time, but I will tell you, for stage 4 cancer patients like Natalie, this could mean the difference between life and death. Secretary Kennedy, how many staff have been cut from the NIH's clinical center? I want a specific number.
I can't tell you that now, Senator Murray. What I can tell you is that if you contact my office tomorrow, I'll look specifically into that.
Well, that is not acceptable. I want an answer back by that. She deserves it. I do it. She doesn't have much time. She deserves an answer back.
And
from you.
wouldn't you rather get her into that clinical trial as fast as you can?
Absolutely. And
All
I
right,
wanna-
so if you contact my office tomorrow, this is if that
you
happened.
are here to defend your budget. I'm here to ask you questions about the impact of that.
Well, you asked me about a specific case that I want to help with.
Correct. I'm
I don't
happy to
think
have that,
anybody,
but there are
I don't think that should happen to anybody.
Okay, well, what have you, and I mean you personally, done to assess how those staff cuts are impacting patient care? She is one of many. What have you done to assess that?
I provided the guidelines that said we shouldn't, that no clinical trials should be affected by the cuts. I have, Matt Mamoli.
Mr. Secretary, I just have a short amount of time. They are impacting clinical trials.
You asked me a question. Do you want me to answer it?
I want to tell you, you need to know this. You're here to defend the NIH budget, which
Yeah, Senator, do you want me to answer your question?
Well, I want
You want me to answer your question,
to
Senator?
tell you that Natalie is sitting there waiting for treatment.
I'm
You're
offering to
here
help her, but you don't care.
Mr.
You don't
Secretary,
care about
I
Natalie.
reclaim my
I've
time.
offered to help Natalie.
I am asking you a question, and it is critical. You are here to defend cutting NIH by half. Do you genuinely believe that that won't result in more stories like Natalie's?
I think the cuts that are now proposed by NIH are going to hurt. I think that President Trump, listen, there's no agency head in the government like myself that wants to see their budget cut. And
Well,
for me,
and I asked you, have you personally assessed what this is doing to patients? And I am telling you, one story of one person, it is impacting life or death situation. I think it's
you want me to answer your question, Senator?
Well, you did.
Oh,
and you pretty much
I
said
have
you
not.
didn't know.
You have not allowed me to answer it.
Well, I will just say that it is my job to be a voice for people like Natalie and countless other patients who are like her. So you've got to fix this. I want to know, and I want a personal update on Natalie's case, and you offered that. Please give that to me in the next 24 hours, and I expect details and transparency about the state of NIH clinical care.
You contact my office, Senator, and
I
I
think you
will
could
do
contact
everything
my
in my
office as
power to try to get Natalie into
Let me,
that.
I got 1 minute left, and I want to ask you about the NIOSH cuts. I am really alarmed by your decision to essentially eliminate the National Institutes for Occupational Safety and Health. You've already fired nearly 90% of the staff. That includes the staff in my state at the Spokane Research Lab. Those are experts. They do essential work to protect miners and firefighters and farm workers, people who work in dangerous conditions. I am told that after a backlash, you are reinstating some of those, mainly in the West Virginia office, but nobody in the Western United States. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to how you've made these decisions. And how do you explain this to my constituents in Spokane who are out of a job and the workers that are being impacted by that?
The work in NIOSH will not be interrupted. I've brought back 328 workers, mainly in the Cleveland office and the Morgantown office and for the World Trade Center site. And that work will continue. The work on mine safety will continue. The epicenter of that work has been Cleveland and it's been Morgantown. We understand it's a critically important function, and I did not want to see it end.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say you can't fire 90% of the people and assume the work gets done.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease, and caring for people with this devastating chronic disease costs us some $360 billion a year. I am the author of a law that's known as the BOLD Act. It takes a public health approach to Alzheimer's. It educates providers, promotes earlier diagnosis, it helps caregivers, and it also promotes lifestyle changes. I have worked very hard to make sure that HHS has the resources to carry out this law. which was just recently extended. I'm concerned that the reductions in force of approximately 10,000 staff across the HHS will completely undermine this act. And this act, in many ways, is very consistent with your approach of looking at public health issues for chronic diseases. For example, the Healthy Aging Branch administers the BOLD Act for Alzheimer's. It has lost all of its staff. So how can you ensure that the CDC...
Hey, Chad, I can't translate some of that Hebrew. I believe it's Hebrew. I can't translate that, so if somebody could translate that in the chat, I would love it. But welcome back to the stream. I had to take a quick break, had a quick call. I appreciate y'all tapping into the stream, but let's get back to RFK's testimony.
I don't know enough about that program, but I know that under that division has been folded into the Agency for Healthy America. And a lot of the reports that whole divisions have been liquidated were just wrong. They were divisions that were being reassigned under the reorg. Now, I'm under a constraint here because at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, we were told that a federal judge granted a TRO in our case on the reorg. And my attorneys have asked me not to talk about any details of the reorg today. But on that budget line, I will work with you. I'm committed. Alzheimer's is run in my family. As you know my cousin Maria Shriver, who's deeply involved in it. The NIH had a very, very checkered history on studying Alzheimer's because of the amyloid plaque scandal. And we have an opportunity now to do really good science and find a cure very quickly, and also find out, equally importantly, why so many people are getting Alzheimer's in this generation. I want to make that happen. I want to work with you, Senator, to make sure that that happens and that those programs continue.
Thank you. I chaired recently the first Appropriations Committee hearing of the year, and we focused on...
I won't hold you for a second. Alzheimer's research is very key. Now, I've always had a strong affinity for Alzheimer's patients and organizations that work with them. I used to volunteer as a child, well, teenager. I played the piano for like 13 years, but I used to spend my summers really volunteering there and understanding the impact. I know in Florida, we passed several alerts to where if people with Alzheimer's are driving, they're lost, there's a way to get there. But I would kind of agree with RFK. I think our Alzheimer's, autism, and different things are happening a lot more than they've happened in the past. And we need to kind of find out what we need to do from a healthcare perspective to make sure that even for patients and as the disease gets studied and grown, that, it's there. I know that a couple years ago, a good friend of mine, Mary Barnes, who used to run the Alzheimer's Community Care Association with South Florida, there was a study around marijuana being good for people to prevent Alzheimer's. I don't know where that study has gone. Some professionals support it, some don't. Let me know in the chat how you feel about that. But I'm going to get back to RFK's testimony here. I just wanted to stop there because I do have a soft spot in my heart for Alzheimer's patients, because I do feel that, honestly, it's sad to live 60, 70, 80 years of your life, 90 years, and then have spats where you just can't remember certain people or certain things, whether it's dementia or Alzheimer's or any kind of those memory loss diseases. It's very unsettling and untroubling. I actually have a very good family friend of mine that is suffering with the same thing from an untreated disease. And it gets to a point of, honestly, my mom was getting remarried about a year or two ago, and the lady used to be a florist, and she's doing the flowers, and it's almost a fact of, we literally went in the house, got everything she needed, a small wedding, and all right, cool. And then by the time we got in the car, it was, hey, did I grab my scissors? Did I grab my stuff? And it's like, you see the onset of Alzheimer's and dementia start setting in, and it's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking to see people who, remember you. You know that they have memory, but then it's like they're struggling. But either way, let me get back to RFK. He sounded like he's saying something good. I just want to share that with the chat briefly, man. Alzheimer's is one of the worst diseases out there, for real.
They were going to, the university budget. And in order to curb that abuse, we adopted a 50.
I'm gonna pause it briefly just to answer Father Time's question. It could be the aluminum. I think it could be a number of things in the atmosphere. It could be the food we're eating. I know that people that go live in expats, that go live in other countries, they come back here and don't want to eat a lot of the food here. It's just less additives, less other things. So it could be aluminum. It could be a lot of things. I honestly don't know. I'll lean on science to tell us, but I know that for patients, they're gonna need a lot more than just thoughts and prayers, because it takes a lot for Alzheimer's patients to be cared for, whether they're in a everyday daycare facility or they're at home with their loved ones. It's a lot. So my heart and goes out to caregivers as well, because caregivers need mental support for what they're going through, especially when they got to take care of their parents who could be struggling with these debilitating conditions.
Which is the industry standard. That's what the Gates Foundation or any other foundation would pay. But I understand the University of Maine, University of Alabama, many other universities, state universities, were not abusing it. We lost about $9 billion a year in those kind of costs, and so we have a plan for how to address issues like what's happening at the University of Maine. I'm being gavelled out, so I will talk to you privately about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Kennedy, you run a department that touches the lives of almost every American. Yet for this budget hearing, these are the 6 pages that we have gotten in terms of your budget request. We are also 7.5 months into this fiscal year, and yet you are not telling the American public anything about how you are spending the billions in taxpayer dollars right now. You had to submit an operating plan to the Congress, and this is just a sample page, but 530 programs simply have asterisks. Secretary Kennedy, this isn't about your hiding information from me. This is about your hiding information from the American public. And if you're going to cut cancer research or gut mental health support, at least stand by your work and explain it to the American people. Now, Secretary Kennedy, I want to start with what I hope is an easy question for you. Do you think lead poisoning in children is a significant concern?
Is lead poisoning
in children a significant concern?
It's a extremely significant concern.
Thank you. Then I would like to know why your department has effectively shut down the very program to address lead poisoning in children.
Oh, there we
City of
go.
Milwaukee requested assistance from the CDC to help the city respond to lead poisoning cases tied to public schools. 6 schools have been closed, displacing more than 1,800 school children.
That's wild.
The request for federal assistance was denied because of lack of staff. The entire childhood lead poisoning branch has been fired. In the words of a Milwaukee mom, it really sends a message of, you don't matter. I don't know what you would say to parents who must now test their children for lead and deal with school closures. But do you intend to eliminate this branch at CDC, yes or no?
No, we do not.
Okay. Because you cannot tell us that you want to make America healthy again when you are willfully destroying programs that keep children safe and healthy from lead poisoning. Congress dedicated $51 million in funding for this particular program. But when a community asks for help to prevent lifelong complications for children, and there is no one there to pick up the phone, and it's not because this program is ineffective, it's because you fired the entire team whose job it is to support communities like Milwaukee.
If that money has been appropriated, we will spend that money if it's been appropriated to Milwaukee, we will spend it in Milwaukee. I've spent a lot of time in Milwaukee
It's to
working on
provide
that issue.
expert, and the entire staff has been fired. Secretary Kennedy, I did note in your opening testimony, although we wouldn't know it from the skinny budget that we have, that you plan on funding the Head Start program. But I want to tell you about the ramifications of what has happened to date with regard to Head Start. I've heard from families across the state, people who are terrified about the uncertainty and instability surrounding Head Start. Just 1 week into President Trump's administration, Head Start programs in Wisconsin suddenly couldn't access their grant funding. It forced one Head Start in Waukesha, Wisconsin to temporarily close, leaving 250 families without care. Over the last 4 months, HHS has provided roughly $1 billion less to Head Start programs across the country than during the same period last year. The delays in funding have exacerbated uncertainty for programs needing to make payroll. And in some instances, like the one I cited in Waukesha, programs have had to shut their doors until the payments came through. Now, I don't know what you would say to a parent who is unable to drop their child off at preschool because you failed to get already appropriated money out the door. Or maybe I should ask you, what would you say to a parent who shows up for child care or for Head Start and the doors are closed?
I would be very sad if somebody shut up. I fought very, very hard to make sure that there be
What
no
is
cuts.
causing the delays in Head Start funding?
I fought very hard to make sure that Head Start gets all of its funding next year.
Well, we need it this year, and why are there delays now?
I don't know that there are, Senator, and I will look into it, but I don't know. There should not be any delays. The funding is there. We are spending it. It's allocated. I don't know why there would be those kind of problems. I can tell you that within the agency, there were, there were people who wanted to make the Trump administration look bad, and that there were checks held up that shouldn't have been. I will have to look into that, Senator.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Good to see you. I want to talk a little bit about the HHS reorganization on some of the programs that impact Alaska's most vulnerable populations. I sent you a note letting you know that just after this hearing, I'm going to be chairing a Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, specifically examining HHS tribal programs that are outside of IHS. I really thank you for your early efforts to exempt IHS healthcare providers from the RIFs. That was very important. But I've also heard concerns from tribal leaders on the impacts of RIFs to key HHS programs serving their communities. So I know you're going to have some of your folks tuning in on that, and I really appreciate that. But some of the other reductions that we're looking at within your budget do have significant consequences to a state like mine. One is the LIHEAP program, the Low-Income Energy Assistance. For us, it's not a budget line item. You've been to Alaska, you know that the temperatures there can get really, really tough. Keeps people from freezing to death in their homes. Another program is NIOSH, and I know that HHS had rescinded a number of those employees. That was great news. But the employees that received RIF notices for the program were not rescinded in the NIOSH Center for Marine Safety and Health Studies. So this is a big deal for our commercial fishing safety. It could effectively leave our fishing fleet out of compliance with Coast Guard safety regs. So we're watching that very, very carefully. And then again, shared focus here on making sure that our children are as healthy as they possibly can be. So I want to look to ways that we can strengthen and not eliminate the Head Start program. But I wanted to ask you.
You're talking about the NIOSH program.
NIOSH, yeah.
You should talk to me about that. Okay. And, as you know, that's something that I'm deeply concerned with the commercial fishery. So we should talk about it. And let's, and let's work for a solution.
Got it. I am with you right there. Let me ask about domestic violence and sexual assault funding. Right now, I'm receiving a lot of incoming from our community-based domestic and sexual violence program operators. They're really concerned about the delayed release of FY25 funding, the absence of notices of funding opportunities, as well as proposed cuts or consolidations that might threaten the Office of Family Violence Prevention and CDC's Division of Violence Prevention. So you've got some programs there that are really foundational to domestic and sexual violence. They've been reauthorized with bipartisan support. So I'm going to enter into the record a letter from the National Task Force, and it basically was sent to you, I guess, yesterday, just urging the communication of concrete plans for releasing some of these funds. So I want to raise that to your level, but I want to make sure that we're sending the right signal to so many who are just really on the edge with, again, these community-based services that are helping the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. So we've got the funding that's out there. It's just delayed. We need help releasing that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the domestic violence funding was not cut. So I don't know. I mean, I have to go back and check, but I specifically asked about that program last night. Was told that there was no cuts, that President Trump is committed to it, and so I don't know why people would be experiencing even delays.
And it may be that it is with the RIFs, you don't have people that are processing these things. So again, I want to get this to the top of your screen. Last question for you. I mentioned LIHEAP. The budget proposal, the skinny budget proposes to eliminate LIHEAP, and the proposal says that it's unnecessary because states have policies preventing utility disconnection for low-income households, effectively making LIHEAP a pass-through benefiting utilities in the Northeast. Further, LIHEAP rewards states like New York and California, two of the top recipients for LIHEAP funding, which have implemented anti-consumer policies. I'm just telling you, we're not in the Northeast, we're not in that bucket, we're cold. There are other places that are hot. LIHEAP is a lifesaver. I did see your statement from yesterday saying that OMB was thinking that President Trump's energy policy is going to reduce costs dramatically. It may be a while. Right now, folks in Alaska still need those ugly diesel generators to keep warm. So I
know. I was on the Navajo. First of all, I've heard that my whole life because my family was involved in providing low-cost energy to poor New England, and there are people in New England who suffer from if energy prices are high and you have a cold winter. I was on the Navajo reservation a couple of weeks ago, and Navajo President Boone Nygren said to me, if we cut LIHEAP, people will die on this reservation. I know the same is true in Alaska. The presumption behind the budget cuts were that the energy prices were going to drop dramatically, in which case these payments would just become a subsidy to the oil industry. If that doesn't happen, I would expect Congress would then still appropriate the money, and I will spend it. I've already spent $400 million between January and now on this program, and we've made made sure to get it out to all the families that needed it. So
I think you're going to find a lot of support on this committee for that. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Secretary Kennedy, I want to talk to you about your relationship with this committee and this Congress. I want to talk to you about the statements that you made to the chairman of this committee and to members of this committee during your confirmation hearing about vaccines. You didn't tell the truth. I find that to be really dangerous for our relationship. If I were the chairman who believes in vaccines and voted for you because he believed what you said about supporting vaccines, my head would be exploding. In the hearing, you told us, quote, "I will not work to impound, divert, or otherwise reduce any funding appropriated by Congress for the purpose of vaccination programs." That's not the truth. You've done exactly. Let me finish my question.
Yeah, I didn't hear what you said. I'm just asking you to repeat it so I can understand your question.
During the hearing, I'll repeat it. During the hearing, you said to this committee and to the Finance Committee, I will not work to impound, divert, or otherwise reduce funding appropriated by Congress for the purpose of vaccination programs. That is not what happened. You've done the opposite. You canceled $12 billion in grants to the states, including my state, that are used to administer and track vaccines. You promised Chairman Cassidy.
When did I do that?
Madam Chair, would you allow me to finish my question?
Keep going with your question.
When did I do that?
Let me finish my question.
Accusation. Just tell me when I did it so I can understand what the question is.
You have canceled $12 billion in public health grants to states, whether you know this or not. That funding is used by the states in part to be able to administer and dispense information about vaccines. Let me give you, Mr. Secretary. Let me give you the full panoply of
accusations,
the things you said before this committee that didn't turn out to be true. You also promised Chairman Cassidy that the FDA would not change vaccine standards from, quote, historical norms. But what happened as soon as you were sworn in? You announced new standards for vaccine approvals that you proudly referred to in your own press release as a radical departure from current practice. And experts say that that departure will delay approvals. You also said, specific to the measles vaccine, that you support the measles vaccine. But you have consistently been undermining the measles vaccine. You told the public that the vaccine wanes very quickly. You went on the Dr. Phil show and said that the measles vaccine was never fully tested for safety. You said there's fetal debris in the measles vaccine. And this morning—
All true.
This morning in
Do
front
you want me to lie to the public?
That's not— none of that is— none
Of course it's true.
None
Of
of
course
that
it's
is
true,
true,
Senator.
Mr.
You're
Secretary.
Senator begging your
And I
progress.
will
You
submit—
do not know what you're talking
submit
about.
for the record.
Let's have a little bit of order so that you can get
Madam
your
Chair,
question and he can get
I didn't
his
ask.
statement.
I didn't ask for a response yet.
I
I'd
understand
like
that.
to lay out the predicate of my question before I'm interrupted by the witness. He should
Go
have some
ahead.
respect for this committee.
Go ahead.
Just this morning in front of the House of Representatives, you also said that you, in fact, would not recommend that kids get vaccinated for measles. You said you would just lay out the pros and cons. Okay, so this is the summation of everything that you have said to compromise people's faith in the measles vaccine in particular is contrary to what you said before this committee. You said you support the measles vaccine, but then you have laid out a set of facts that are contested, and I will submit information for the record from experts who contest what you've said about the vaccine, and the result is to undermine faith in the vaccine. It's kind of like saying, listen, I think you should swim in that lake, but you know, the lake is probably toxic, and there's probably a ton of snakes and alligators in that lake, but I think you should swim in it. Nobody's gonna swim in that lake if that's what you say. And so I want you to acknowledge that when you say you support the measles vaccine and then go out and repeatedly undermine the vaccine with information that is contested by public health experts, that is not supporting the vaccine.
You know how a few changes on your website can somehow take weeks to ship? With Framer, that's over. Because while your site lives here, it also lives here, giving designers and marketers the freedom to update and publish all on their own, while your developers focus on the big stuff. With a powerful CMS, a growing universe of plugins, and your whole team unblocked, you're not just building a website, you're building momentum. Ship faster, build smarter with Framer.
Necessarily want to spend the remaining 20 seconds in an argument over the science, but do you at least understand that that's the consequence of what you're saying? And are you actually still recommending people get the vaccine, or are you not?
Senator, if I advised you to swim in a lake that I knew there to be alligators in, wouldn't you want me to tell you there were alligators in it?
So are you recommending the measles vaccine or not?
What I've said and what I said—
It doesn't sound like you are, if that's—
Are you going to let me answer? Or are you going to keep interrupting?
Are you or are you not?
Are you going to let me answer? What I pledged before this committee during my confirmation is that I would tell the truth, that I would have radical transparency. I'm going to tell the truth about everything we know and we don't know about vaccines.
Are you recommending the measles vaccine or not?
I am not going to just tell people everything is safe and effective if I know that there's issues. I need to respect people's intelligence.
I think you're answering the question. I think you're
And
answering
the reason
the question. That's
that people—
really dangerous for the American public and for families.
The reason people have lost faith in this program is because they've been lied to by public officials for year after year after year.
No longer recommending the measles vaccine.
Senator Marshall.
All right.
And by the way, I said at the hearing this morning that I was recommending the measles vaccine. Go look at the transcript.
Senator Marshall.
Madam Chairman, thank you so much for being here, Mr. Secretary. We're glad you're here. Let's stay on the measles vaccine just for a second. Let me catch my breath after that, all that. I'm an obstetrician. If a 25-year-old pregnant woman asked me if she should take the measles vaccine, the MMR, I would give her the answer, no, you shouldn't. But if she was 25 and trying to get pregnant, I would give her different advice. I've always valued the sanctity of the physician-patient relationship. I went to medical school for 4 years. I did 4 years of residency. I delivered thousands of babies. It's my job to give that recommendation. What's the role of the Secretary of HHS as far as recommendations of vaccine, and just discuss it a little bit further?
Well, the vaccine recommendations, Senator, are normally made through ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices, which is an outside consulting committee at CDC. There's another committee called VRBPAC, which is within FDA, that actually recommends whether the vaccines get licensed or not. And so that's where the recommendations come from. And you know what? Traditionally, they have not done evidence-based medicine. They only adopted evidence-based medicine about 12 years ago. And what we've said during our administration is we want to have safety studies prior to the licensure and recommendation of vaccines. Vaccines are the only medical product that is exempt from pre-licensing safety testing. So the only vaccine that has been tested in a full-blown placebo trial against an inert placebo was the COVID vaccine. The other 76 shots that children in this country receive between birth and 18 years old, none of them have been safety tested in pre-licensing studies against a placebo, which means we don't understand the risk profile for those products, and that's something that I intend to remedy.
Okay. You said earlier you couldn't talk about the reorganization, and maybe you cannot answer this question, but maybe you can at least confirm these facts for me or not. Isn't it true that under Joe Biden's White House, they added 20,000 employees to HHS? When you were nominated, there was 28 divisions with HHS, 100 communication offices, 40 IT departments, 9 HR units as well. Can you answer that question?
Yes, that's right. There are dozens of IT departments. There's 8 senior finance officials. There are 9 separate offices on women's health, 8 separate offices for minority health, 27 separate offices for HIV, 59 behavioral health programs, 40 opioid programs. What we're trying to do is consolidate, streamline, eliminate the redundancies, eliminate all those administrative costs for each one of those little departments, consolidate them, and make them make sense and make them accountable to the American people.
And I suppose all those IT systems communicate with each other. You all are on one IT
There's
system.
40, as you pointed out, there's 40 procurement departments with 4 separate computer systems that don't talk to each other. Yeah. So, and as you pointed out, my department grew by 38% over the last 4 years. I would say that's great if Americans got healthier, but they didn't. They got worse. So what we're trying to do is go back to the pre-COVID levels and to start making the department function as it would if in a rational universe, and to bring in modern AI and telemedicine and all the opportunities we have now, these new efficiencies and for medical delivery to the American people.
I want to let you know I was
and we're not
in the
able to take
background
advantage.
watching that last exchange with RFK and the senator. It was pretty heated about the vaccines, about did he lie and all other stuff. I actually have a couple work things to do. I'm gonna keep RFK on. I just want to check in with y'all. I will be turning my camera off, but I do appreciate y'all tapping in with the stream today. More than anything, I am your boy, the hip hop lobbyist. If it's your first time here, I'm a professional lobbyist in the state of Florida. At least streaming here some of the testimony today want to at least tap in, but more than anything, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I have some more content in mind, but I don't want to waste your time and tell you about that because you want to see RFK. That's why you're on the stream today. Let's tap back in, and then we're also going to go through some Diddy stuff. I got to go pick my son up from daycare around 3:45, 3 or 4 o'clock Eastern time. So this stream we're probably wrapping up in the next 30, 40 minutes. But more than anything, let's tap in, see what else is happening. I'm gonna cut my camera off, but I will be here. Appreciate y'all tapping in.
The NIH has made all these extraordinary breakthroughs, and particularly in treating cancer and, reducing mortalities for colorectal cancer. But my question is, isn't it as important to find out why kids are getting colorectal cancer? When you and I were kids, there were 0 kids with colorectal cancer. It's epidemic now. So it's not really a badge for us when we say, oh, we can make it less lethal. Why don't we go figure out what's causing it and eliminate that exposure? With all of these, with Alzheimer's, with heart disease, there's something is making Americans very, very sick. And our response should not be just, okay, we'll develop a pharmaceutical fix for it or a medical fix. Let's figure out what it is and get rid of it so we can have healthy kids again.
Thank you. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I want to ask you some questions about staff reduction and kind of the timing of it. You were confirmed by the Senate on February 13th, so I'm sort of assuming that things happened before you were confirmed were other people's work. On January 28th, the fork in the road letter came out to people across the federal employment space, widely attributed to OPM and Elon Musk and Doge. But that was before you were confirmed, so you had nothing to do with the fork in the road letter, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You were confirmed on February 13. On February 14, one day later, HHS announced that 3,500 probationary employees were going to be laid off. I know you're a hard worker, but am I right to assume that in the one day between your confirmation and the next day, you weren't the primary decision maker about laying off probationary employees at HHS?
I was aware of it, and I could have blocked it.
Yeah, you were aware of it, so you weren't the primary decision maker. Was that a decision that was made like OPM or Doge? And because it wasn't just HHS, it was all federal agencies who would lay off probationary. Do you know where that
I had my full upper staff in place before I got there.
Right, but did they make the decision, or was it White House and Doge to lay off probationary employees?
They made the decision. My staff made the decision,
Okay.
although Doge came in and Doge gave us information that we wouldn't otherwise have had access to.
Okay. Next, we go to April 1st.
I can also say this.
No, all I asked was if you made it, and you answered the question, and I appreciate it. April 1, HHS RIFs 10,000 employees effective June 2. Now, by this point, you had been secretary for about 6 weeks. A few days after that announcement, HHS staff briefed our staff, the Senate help staff, and basically, just here's some highlights. In that 10,000 RIFs, 467 staff at the Administration for Children and Families, 2,473 at the Centers for Disease Control, 322 at CMS, 400 at HRSA, 1,312 at National Institutes of Health, 197 at SAMHSA, 2,519 at the Food and Drug Administration. By now, you've been secretary for 6 weeks, so this was RIFs, not the forks, but you were involved in the decision about these 10,000 RIFs, correct?
Yes.
And in tandem with your leadership team, correct?
Yes. And as I said before, I pushed back on certain ones and canceled certain ones.
Yeah. I think yesterday, it may have been earlier today, you confirmed that 20,000 employees have been let go, 10,000 at HHS, 10,000 RIFed and 10,000 forked. Do you know how many of the 20,000 were veterans?
No, I do not.
That is a fact that's very easy to determine from someone's personnel file. So I'm going to ask that question for the record. We are finding across the government that veterans are disproportionately being let go, A, because they're a higher percentage of the federal workforce, and B, they're a dramatically higher percentage of probationary employees because they leave military service after 10 or 25 years, and then they're probationary new employees when they join the civilian service. So I want to find the answer to that question. Where does the rubber meet the road on 20,000 RIFs and layoffs and forks? In people not getting cancer trials, and I appreciate your willingness to help Senator Murray's constituent, in state grants being canceled, in Virginia losing $425 million in funding to the Virginia Department of Health. But here's a small example. All of our offices do casework. All of them do casework. And we get requests from constituents all the time. CMS is the largest agency in the federal government. Its budget is nearly twice the size of the Pentagon. And people who depend on Medicaid, Medicare, and the S-chip program really, really depend on it. And it's the most consistent in the top 3 or 4 in terms of constituent requests to my office. Answer this question about Medicare or Medicaid or the S-chip program. In every administration I've served with, Obama, Trump 1, Biden, I get answers to questions on behalf of constituents. I may not get them as fast as I like, and sometimes I like the answer and sometimes I don't. But let me show you what CMS is now doing to answer constituent questions. I've omitted the name of the constituent, and I've omitted the name of my staffer. This was very recent. A hardworking retiree, patriotic tax-paying American who's on Medicare wrote to ask CMS a very simple question about Medicare. Couldn't get an answer. Asked us to reach out. We reached out to the Medicare Part C and D Congressional Liaison Office. And here was their answer to our basic question. Unfortunately, there is not an update to provide. With the recent change of administration, we are unable to provide any information related on matters related to Mr. X's request, Congressional Casework Team. I mean, if you're just an everyday, hardworking American retiree on Medicare, and you have a basic question about it, you ought to be able to get an answer. And I'm just going to say, I've shared this with my colleagues, and many of us are having the same experience where our constituents can't get a basic question answered. I wonder if 20,000 fewer employees is connected to this. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Senator Husted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Kennedy, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate the work that you have done in trying to raise awareness about making America healthy again, particularly as it relates to our dietary consumption, how food can be medicine, food can make us sick. You have raised a great deal of awareness, and when we talk about public education campaigns, I think you've done more to shine the light on things that average Americans can do to make themselves healthier than almost any secretary I can recall. So thank you for that service. I also have listened to a lot of the conversation today where somehow we think that spending more is somehow compassionate on every single thing. Like you have to spend more to do it, even though every single person in this Congress knows that they are spending borrowed money that our children will have to repay. $106,000, their share of the national debt when you're a child born into this nation right now. And everything that you can do to create savings and improve the quality of services that American taxpayers get from your agency, I commend you on it. I encourage you to do so. I want to give you the opportunity to share a couple points that you might want to share about how some of the work that you're doing in this budget is going to help people become healthier, generate some better outcomes for them, and savings that you think can be created that would not harm somebody's health, but actually preserve the fiscal future of this nation so that those children can grow up and have access to the American dream that we all had access to when we were born in this nation. So just share your thoughts.
And I appreciate you raising that about the debt issue, because the point I was making earlier was that there's no agency head that wants to reduce the size of their agency. I'd rather have as much money and power as I can possibly have. I recognize that President Trump and the OMB director have a larger duty and a larger vision, which is we're spending $2 trillion a year that we don't have, and we're building our children. And that is a moral deficiency. Senator Sanders asked me about the morality of universal health. And there's a good moral argument for that, but there's also a moral argument And when, we're spending $1 trillion a year just to service that debt, within 5 years, half of every dollar collected in taxes is going to go to servicing the debt. And within 10 years, it could be 100%. And then our kids are doomed. And that is the debt is a social determinant of health. We are trying to reverse that, and we're doing it in a way that's not just throwing more money at the problem. We're revising the GRAD standards. 20 years of Democrats have said, we need to revise the GRAD standards. I've done it in 100 days. We're getting rid of 9 petroleum-based synthetic dyes in our food. 20 years the Democrats have been saying we want to do this, and I've done that in 100 days. We're rewriting the dietary guidelines that President Biden gave us, 453 pages long, and it's just an industry-generated document, the same industry impulse that put Fruit Loops at the top of the food pyramid. We are creating a 4-page document that can be locally sourced so that will drive the school lunch program. We've called on and inspired governors and legislatures across the country to ask for exemptions to the SNAP program to get soda and candy off of SNAP. Is that a time?
No, you're good. Thank you for the work on SNAP, by the way, because getting unhealthy foods out of that program, if you're at the bottom quartile of income, you're almost twice as likely to be obese as you're at the top quartile.
And diabetic.
And it's costing people their productivity, their quality of life. It's costing the American taxpayer more money through Medicare, Medicaid, and other health services that we provide. And I just would say, we talked about kids. I want to give you a moment to just share a thought. In 2022, we had a shortage of infant formula. There's a look at children now about what they should have in that infant formula. You're doing that with the
Operation
Store. Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit about that, and just if you have a moment. Well, I'll just say, Mr. Chairman, thank you for doing that. How about that? There we go.
But the Secretary made the statement that no vaccines except for COVID have been evaluated against placebo. For the record, that's not true. Rotavirus, measles, and HPV vaccines have been, and some vaccines are tested against previous versions. So just for the record, to set that straight. Next, Senator Hassan.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Secretary Kennedy, thank you for being here. I'd like to start by talking about the current measles outbreak, which I know is a concern for all of us here today. 2 children in Texas have tragically died from measles this year, the first children to die from measles in our country in more than 20 years. Measles is almost completely preventable with the measles vaccine. As you know, it's critical that families hear directly and clearly from healthcare leaders about how they can best protect their children. So, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to give you an opportunity to say clearly here today to any parents who are watching that the best way to protect their children from measles is to vaccinate them.
Yeah, I've said that the best way to stop the spread of measles is through vaccination. But I would say this, we have handled this measles outbreak. We get a measles outbreak every year. We've handled this measles outbreak better than any other nation.
What I was interested in, you can say, what I asked you to do was to say straight to the camera, as you did on social media, that it is your position that the best way for parents to prevent their kids from getting measles is to vaccinate them. And that is your statement today.
I said that too.
All right, well, that is great, thank you. Now, you lead the nation's health department, so let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you think HHS should employ anyone who has endangered the health of children?
No.
You hired David Geyer to lead autism research at HHS, an individual who fraudulently posed as a doctor and gave dangerous medications and medical tests to children with autism. According to the state of Maryland's investigation, David Geyer, who has no medical license or training, gave hormone blocker injections to children with autism who were as young as 8 years old, which the Maryland Board of Medicine said poses a substantial risk of harm. Secretary Kennedy, yes or no, will you fire David Geyer?
First of all, what you're saying is not true. And we did not hire David Geyer to manage autism research at HHS.
So
And
what is
just-
his job?
and-
What
and-
is his
and
job
you
then?
just said some very defamatory
Well, no,
things about a person who, by the way,
so let me just be clear for the record.
those charges, Senator, I am going to correct the record on
No,
this
let
because
me
you
just
have defamed
let
a
me tell you
person.
what the record says, and then I will hear from you. Last week, when Mr. O'Neill was here in his confirmation hearing,
This shit
I
turning up,
submitted
y'all.
for the record the charge that the state of Maryland laid out. Now, if you'd like also for me to submit to the record with unanimous consent today the findings of the state of Maryland, which fined him $10,000 for practicing medicine without a license. He does not have a medical license, and for
This is
providing
wild.
and instructing and giving children hormone blockers. That is what the finding of the Maryland Department, the state of Maryland, its medical licensing board was. And I'll submit that for the record, I hope with unanimous consent.
I'm assuming that you don't know what I'm about to tell you, or you wouldn't say something that was so dishonest.
Oh, wow.
You may or may not know that David Geyer sued the American.
Oh, I do know that. I do know that. That doesn't
And that
change
he
the
ran-
findings,
and that- and
nor does
that-
it, nor
that
does it change
finding
the
was
experience of the parents
That
who
finding-
testified.
This shit turning up, chat. My bad. Let me turn me down.
And he was awarded
My bad,
$5
chat. My bad. My bad. My
million
bad.
That
against
is
American-
not true. Now, let me ask, so I just want confirmation. David
My bad,
Geyer
Chet.
is still at HHS. I wrote you a letter
David
about this
Geyer
a month
was-
ago, and you have not responded.
Well, I apologize for that. That's our bad. And I will respond. But David Geyer is not managing autism research.
So
at
what
my
is his job?
agency,
What
and
is
we never said that he was.
what is his job at HHS? This is somebody who gave parents the impression that he was a doctor and gave hormone blockers to children as young as 8, telling them that hormone blockers would somehow magically help.
Chat, did y'all know about this? Chat, did you know about any of this? Because this is a very heated discussion. I thought it was a little tense earlier, but I'm enjoying this more than anything. I am the boy, the hip hop lobbyist. I've been doing a little work in the background, have my camera off, so you just tapping in. We here with your boy now, but
Help their kids
I
with
didn't know about
autism.
any of this.
His father.
Let me know, Jet.
His father is a doctor, but he is not. And his father was
And
not
as
in
I
the
said,
room and did not, and he faked his father's signature according to the State Board of Medicine.
And that ruling was overturned by a court. So what you're saying is just wrong. It's just a lie. And they were actually, the court said that the Maryland Board of Physicians was guilty of actual malice in fabricating those charges against David Geyer.
Well, we will pursue this.
Yeah.
And I will submit for the record.
So do you want to know why we brought David Geyer in?
Sure.
Because it wasn't to run autism research. In 2002, the CDC runs a vaccine safety data link, which is supposed to be the vaccine information for the biggest HMOs that are supposed to allow CDC to have a surveillance system for vaccine injury. It's a backstop system. The CDC will not let any physicians in there to look at it or any scientists, independent scientists.
He's neither a scientist nor a physician.
Right. Congress ordered CDC to open it to the Geyers. So they are the only scientists who have ever been in there.
But again, Mr. Geyer is not a scientist. Thank you.
Independent scientists.
Okay.
That's
Senator
wild.
Hess's time's expired.
I'm going to pause it because it's been a lot happening. It's been a lot happening with this testimony today, and we still got a little ways to go. All right, there's at least, what are we looking at? 20 more minutes of this? 10 more minutes? 10 more minutes. We got 10 more minutes. Y'all had 10 minutes, right? That's 10 minutes. Let's wrap up with RFK.
Did you have a unanimous?
I'm going to have RFK finish up. Like I told you, I'm going to have to go get my son from daycare. Y'all can stay here and stay on the stream till I drive back and come back. Hold on, y'all. 1 second. Turn the volume back up.
And also a unanimous consent request for the finding.
What y'all say now? My bad. I got it on.
Without a, yeah, without
I'm on the stream. Hold on.
And now, Mr. Kennedy, before we get to my time, do you want, if you'd like to finish your response, go ahead, and then I'll recognize myself.
David Geyer is the only living independent scientist who's seen the VSD inside. There's been a lot of monkey business with the VSD, including allegations of fraud. And he was hired by an independent contractor that not as an HHS employee, but by an independent contractor to look at the documents that we were getting to the VSD to see if they conformed with what he saw between 2002 and 2016. And that's the only reason that he was brought in, to see if there was, there's so much information that has disappeared from that database. The only way we could find out what information disappeared was because he was the one guy who saw it.
And just let the record show he's not a scientist. Thank you very much.
All right. Secretary Kennedy, different subject, on a different subject. You and I have talked before, when you've been before this committee, and you and I have talked in person a number of times about mifepristone. I just want to follow up with you because since the last time you were before the committee and the last time you and I spoke, there's been a major study by the Ethics and Public Policy Center of 865,727 prescribed cases of mifepristone abortions, chemical abortions, between 2017 and 2023. Have you seen this study? Are you familiar with this? Do you know?
Yes, I am.
You will remember then that this data shows the biggest study on mifepristone done, I think, ever, and it showed that nearly 11% of women experience very serious adverse health effects, to include sepsis, hemorrhaging, infection, of course, emergency room visits. Now, by the way, that's 22 times higher. That rate is 22 times higher than the FDA's current label, which says it's just 0.5. The incidence of serious adverse health events. So my question to you is this: you previously testified to the committee that you would do a top to bottom review of mifepristone. Mifepristone is subject to a REMS currently. You have said you'll do a top to bottom review. Do you continue to stand by that, and don't you think that this new data shows that the need to do a review is in fact very pressing?
I think the new data, first of all, it validates the Cass study, which is previously probably the most comprehensive data that we've seen on it, and it is, and it's alarming, and clearly it indicates that at very least the label should be changed. I've asked Marty McCary, who's the director of FDA, to do a complete review and to report back.
Good. Do you have any sense of timeline, Mr.
I
Secretary?
do not.
That? It will be a top priority, though, for you. Is that safe to say? You say that it probably indicates the label needs to be changed. Do you think it's also important as part of your review to consider whether it's necessary now to put back in place the long-standing safety protocols that always accompanied mifepristone until the last administration? In-person dispensing, doctor visits, screening for ectopic pregnancies?
I know that Marty McCary will make a recommendation. I feel that the policy changes will ultimately go through the White House, through President Trump.
But you'll make a recommendation based on the data?
Yes.
Good. On a different subject, talking about the advertising that is routinely done by pharmaceutical companies, you have been a longtime critic of direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. You wrote, I think, in the Wall Street Journal a little over a year ago about the need to revisit guidelines around pharmaceutical advertising. Is that still your view? I mean, has your view changed?
Pharmaceutical advertising is particularly insidious because, commercial advertising has some level of First Amendment protection, not as great as political speech. It doesn't have the kind of strict scrutiny applied to political speech. It still has a level of protection. But pharmaceutical advertising is unique because if a company is advertising, for example, Coca-Cola, the consumer has a choice to whether to buy it, and then he's spending his own money on it, so he's got skin in the game. With pharmaceutical advertising, the consumer's purchasing the product, and it's usually the most expensive form of the product, so that they're usually advertising because they want to bury the existence and the availability of generic drugs that are much cheaper and equally effective. And the consumer is spending not his own money, and most often our money, taxpayer money. Furthermore, the pharmaceutical ad is getting tax deductions, so we are funding it.
I want to ask you just about that. Under current law, pharma companies can deduct their advertising costs as a business expense. Do you think it's time to change that?
Yeah, and I've actually have a call into Scott Besant about that, but I'm working very hard on this issue. And we expect to come out with a policy within the next few weeks.
Well, let me propose that we work together. Today, I'm introducing legislation to repeal the tax deductibility of these advertisements. It is a bipartisan bill with Senator Shaheen on the other side of the aisle here. It is a bicameral bill with both the Democrat and Republican sponsors in the House of Representatives. And my view is it's time to get rid of these tax breaks for these companies and to end this practice. Can you support that?
100% support it.
Fantastic. I look forward to working with you on that. All right, let the record reflect I'm giving up Senator Hickenlooper 15 seconds of my time.
Senator Sanders will also support that.
Absolutely, and I'll go further. The idea you
This
want
is coming out of your time now, John.
The answer is yes.
All right, Senator Hickenlooper.
Senator Sanders can finish your thought, please.
We are I think along with New Zealand, the only countries on earth that allow for pharmaceutical advertising. I think it's time we ended that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for taking the time and for your willingness to come into the public sector. I'm not going to try and play gotcha. But it is an opportunity to spend a little bit of philosophical time. And I guess one question is, do you think our country spends too much on scientific research?
No.
Okay. And so, obviously, you know the NIH is the largest, in terms of biomedical research, there's the Howard Hughes Institute, but the
70% of the world.
Exactly, 70% of the world. And I guess when you look at the level of cuts that we're facing over there, and I'm recognize that a lot of these cuts are imposed upon you. So, but there's a gap in basic fundamental research that's going to have to be filled somehow. And have you got any ideas of how we can do that, given the scale, the dimension of the loss that we're facing?
Well, you know, first of all, my job is to support the president on this and to support OMB. But, you know, like the reality is that, as I've said, no agency head wants to see cuts to his agency. And I love scientific research, so I want to do as much as possible. But I think because of we are very, very aggressively implementing AI, and I think we're going to do it faster and better than anybody else in government, any other agency. We brought very, very high quality caliber people from Silicon Valley.
And I get that, and that will accelerate and help us do more.
That's right. We can shorten clinical trials. We can get rid of animal trials, which we're already doing.
I'm in support of all that. We talked about that for years.
And we can do, and we can now digitalize.
Research I'm talking about is not that so much as the fundamental scientific, basic science research.
Like bench science or epidemiological studies or whatever. And I think we can do a lot of that stuff quicker. You know, I'll take as much money as you give me and I'll spend it well.
Well, I just want to make sure to urge you to be a fighter for more of that research, because there's a questioning of science right now within many in the White House, not everyone, but many in the White House. It really needs to be pushed back. And Senator Hawley, I'll sign on to that bill as well. Second question I've got, we have a lot of issues around wildfires in Colorado right now, and with this is back to the NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety Health. That you mentioned that they kept them in Cleveland and I think somewhere in Pennsylvania. Pretty much everyone's laid off in Colorado.
In Morgantown, yeah.
Yeah, everyone's laid off in Colorado, and that the question really, and I think a couple have been ordered to be reinstated, but all the West is dealing with these, I mean, thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people out fighting fires. These are people risking their lives, you know, walking away from their families every day. And the basic research that needs to be done, I don't think the replacements are going to be, in many cases, they're new onto the job. They're not going to be sufficient to address and really make sure the specific health needs of these workers, these outdoor workers, are addressed. So the question is, how can you make sure that folks in Colorado, like firefighters, are able to do their jobs safely?
I think a lot of the cuts that we're implementing now are painful cuts, and that they, you know, they're cuts that are going to be difficult. But I think the president's position is that we're spending $2 trillion that we don't have, that we are taking from our children. and we've got to protect their rights to prosperity, to enrichment, to dignity, to choice. And, so.
I've heard that argument, and I appreciate it, and I'm a voice of frugality, at least in my office, and try to push it around the Senate where it's allowed. But we're looking at budgets that's going to increase the deficit by who knows how much, $4 to $5 trillion. To take things like this that we know are successful, and not just for Colorado, but for almost every Western state, essential, and you're saving such a small amount of money for something that's so important. I just hope that you can push back on that a little bit, and someone's got to take a stand for these things that are minor financial benefits, but significant losses to how we provide safety for workers and our citizens.
I'm happy to work with you on that, Senator.
Okay, great. I yield back to the chair.
The committee will adjourn for 5 minutes, subject to the call of the chair.
All right, now we have the meeting taking a break. Luckily, the stream was delayed, so they took their break. And while I took the little pauses and everything, it at least gave us time to skip forward a bit after the little break. Now, more than anything, again, I got to get out of here in the next 10 minutes or to get my son from daycare. I'm trying to finish up some work. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get my son from daycare, right? I'm going to end this stream. If you haven't liked and subscribed yet, please go ahead and do it. Because what's going to happen is when I come back, we're going to have a new stream, same title. I may keep everything the same for the most part, but just talk about the Diddy trial. Because we're going to talk about Diddy trial. That's where we started this morning. That's where we're going to end. We may go back and talk about HBCUs and FAMU and things of that nature, but let me get this together, get back on RFK.
Because of the riff.
We'll be back on in a second, y'all.
Canard.
Thank you for the clarification. Senator Banks.
Compassion for Americans with autism and their families. There's still so much that we don't know about the conditions, and there are many questions to be answered. And that's why I was glad that you recently announced an autism research database similar to a registry that you created. The NIH has more than 80 registries for different diseases, and they're a critical tool to understand disease progression.
Yeah,
but even in spite of all of that, you were immediately attacked for privacy violations and accused of ulterior motives. Can you tell us today, how will this database handle protected health information, and is it an opt-in or an opt-out database?
This is thank you, Senator, for asking that. This is a database, as you say, there's actually 190 disease databases at my agency. Almost every important disease has a registry. And the arthritis has a registry, for example, heart disease, cancer, various kinds of
that's what I'm saying.
And the registry
they're not going to be ready for that shit.
Help scientists research what causes the etiology of disease and also what the cures are. It's entirely voluntary. Patient privacy is protected. The data is digitalized and depersonalized so that people can find out who the patient is. And patients have an absolute right to opt out of it. So it's entirely voluntary. But it's a very important tool for scientists.
Oh, wait, hey, I was supposed to get the rebound of that too.
How to treat diseases. If there's a number of people who've used, for example, chelation therapies on autism, and you can look at that, you can see what the outcomes were, or other kinds of therapies, microbiome treatments, all these various treatments that physicians and frontline treatment nurses and doctors are using across the country to address disease and find out which ones work and which ones don't.
You've also been accused of assuming an environmental cause of autism and rejecting a genetic cause. Can we say that your critics are misrepresenting what you really believe?
Well, I don't think. I think if my critics are saying that I reject a genetic cause, they're correct in the sense that the autism is an epidemic, and the genes do not cause epidemics. They can contribute a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. It's like cigarettes and smoking, smoking cigarettes was killing 1 out of every 5 of its customers.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to stay top of the key every time.
I'm at 4 out of 5 are surviving.
So if y'all send it back, I'm gonna always look at
To the ones
the outlet quick.
who got lung cancer and died. And that is a genetic vulnerability, but you also need an environmental toxin. You cannot have a sudden epidemic without an environmental exposure.
Have you halted or redirected funding away from any pre-existing process and research?
I am told, and I haven't done this calculation myself, but I'm told that there was a 20-to-1.
Yeah, see, let's go, man, every time. Oh, they hate it. Oh, they hate it.
Years at NIH. And if you ask me, I believe that was because they did not want to look at the environmental exposures because they were scared of what they'd found. So I don't think we should be funding that genetic work anymore. I think we know a lot about the genes that provide vulnerabilities, high testosterone, low glutathione, the MTHFR gene, the genes that control methylation. All of these are involved, and we know that. And what we really need to do now is to identify the environmental toxins.
I appreciate greatly your attention and effort on that. Secretary Kennedy, we're importing 1/3 of our medicines from China. It's a public health risk as well as a national security risk, and you and I discussed this in your confirmation hearing. I asked you at that point about reshoring medicine production from China during that hearing. I wonder if you could give us any updates on how that's happening.
Yeah, I think there are very exciting things happening, and some of them is a direct result of President Trump's tariffs. And I've been working very closely with David Ricks of Eli Lilly. I think they've been the most aggressive of any of the pharmaceutical companies about answering President Trump's summons to onshore production. They have 9 facilities now that are breaking ground. And one of them, the API facility that they're breaking ground on, will be, I believe, the biggest API facility in the world. These are ingredients, active pharmaceutical ingredients. China controls that market right now, and this single facility could give us back dominance of that market. So I'm very, very optimistic about what's happening, and I'm very grateful to Eli Lilly, which has not always been a big ally of mine. And I'm grateful, and we've been working very closely with the leadership of Eli Lilly to make sure they get what they need to onshore production, because we saw during COVID that for essential medicines, we cannot afford to have the ingredients offshored.
Thank you for your leadership. I yield back.
Senator Markey.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, all I've been hearing from you today is your defense of and advocacy for brutal cuts to Medicaid, brutal cuts to NIH research to find the cure for Alzheimer's and cancer and other diseases, brutal cuts to community health centers, brutal cuts to the CDC, the early warning system for diseases, and all to find the funding for tax cuts for billionaires and millionaires. That's all I've been hearing. And it is absolutely unbelievable that the Secretary of Health and Human Services can sit before the Health Committee and make such an argument. So Secretary Kennedy, for months I've been hearing from people about the impact that you and Donald Trump have had on them. And for months I've been sharing their stories, and I've compiled them here. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to include my Make America Sick agenda.
Without objection.
Included in the record. Thank you. This is a set of stories that are being told to me that I would like to relate to you. Jennifer, who's from Massachusetts, is a stage 4 cancer patient. There is no cure for her diagnosis. Her life depends on federal investment in research and for clinical trials to continue uninterrupted to find a cure for Jennifer with NIH funding. She's right to be worried. I heard from Henry in Rhode Island, who wants a continued funding for cancer research where he works. He's worried about getting fired because the lab's NIH grants under new leadership were cut. He wants to work on cancer research to find the cure for Jennifer. You've already terminated $1.8 billion in NIH
My bad on that.
funding, which for Jennifer should really stand for National Institutes of Hope. She's losing hope. You're defending a 40% cut, Mr. Secretary, in research for Alzheimer's, for cancer, for stroke.
I'm gonna
for
take a
diabetes,
moment
for mental-
before we wrap up the stream and go through the chat. And I'm actually just mute the congressman because he's just going through talking points, which I understand. Both sides are going to have their talking points. Like I said earlier, I have to get to the daycare, and it's about a 30-minute ride there, 30-minute ride back. So I'll be back on in about an hour and a half. Grab something to eat, spend some time with my son for a minute, then come back on to the stream because we're trying to be lobbyist / streamer, all the rest of it, right? Anyway, let me get to some of this chat. Dwan said hi. Hey. Yeah. Ronald, hey, what's going on? Tony, I would listen to what he had to say if he wasn't being blackmailed and sold out. RFK, he sums up everything effed up with America. Every member of his family says he's a wacko. RFK is doing the best he can for the people. Tell her to shut her mouth, always telling lies, and will never listen. Oh, wow. Darlene, DMD. Mary's here. Hey, Mary. My girl. Is that Mary from yesterday that was arguing with the people? They said you was from Alabama. Appreciate you. Most of my kids' childhood measles. We didn't come close to death. I don't know why there was ever a vax for that, for the measles. I mean, I think the measles at one point in time was taking people out. But, we've, I think, as a people, become more strong. Let's listen to what RFK has to say before I tap out today. Hold on. For it now, at least.
Is that the budget for my agency increased by 38% over the Biden administration, and Americans got sicker, and more Americans overdosed, and more Americans died from cancer, and we have now an epidemic of colorectal cancers in our children, and the chronic disease rate has now gone up to 60%. The autism rate has dropped to 1 in 31 children, and all that money that was supposed to cure those diseases or avert them, none of it worked. All we need is leadership and a new vision, and I'm bringing that to my agency.
Look at,
And I'm realigning my agency.
President Trump is negotiating with the Chinese about keeping fentanyl out of our country.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, in the meantime, we can't be cutting the programs for the people who are already suffering from opioid-related
That's real.
diseases. We can't cut the programs. Yes, it would be great if we could cut it. Be great if we could reduce it. While we're waiting for that to happen, why would we cut $1 billion from the programs that go to the families that have the substance abuse issues right now? Why would we cut it now before we get a solution to the problem? They need
First of
treatment
all,
now.
most of the programs that support addiction, including naltrexone, Narcan, Suboxone, methadone, housing, we operate under SAMHSA 500 rehabs that give people access under Medicaid. We are keeping those intact. We have President Trump, because of his leadership, has dropped the fentanyl imports from this country because of his leadership at the border by 40%. So we're actually doing more with less, and we are going to continue to do that. And what I'm doing at my agency is I'm realigning all these perverse incentives that have driven up costs and driven down health. I'm realigning so that people can make money in this country and markets can make money.
Look at 80,000 people died last year. This is not about efficiency. This is about cruelty. Cutting these programs. These people are already addicted. These people already need help. You're slashing
Senator
the
Markey.
programs that families need right now.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Heated exchange with Senator Martin there. Maybe a good time for us to tap out the stream. Let me go full screen so I can see your boy face. Anyway, I appreciate y'all tapping in. We've been on for about 2 hours, roughly 2.5 hours, streaming today. We start off with FAMU, Diddy trial. We didn't really get into the Qatar stuff and everything else, so I'm going to just refresh this stream later. There'll be a duplicate of the title and the thumbnail. There's no point to change it all. We're going to talk about the Diddy trial. We're going to get into Qatar buying over 160 planes. I think I still have it up on Apple News. Is it still up here? Oh, wait, hold on. I know it. It's not on there. Let me look it up. Hold on. Nope, I don't know who she is. Either way, I'm gonna find it. It's not up there yet. Let me go back to the full screen, right? So either way, tapping out now. Got to get my son from daycare, but y'all here. Either way, make sure you like and subscribe so you know when I go back live. I appreciate y'all tapping in today. I'm going to end this, but we'll be back on in maybe 5 o'clock. So be back here at 5 o'clock. I'll be here with you. I'm not going to go back into RFK. They'll probably be done. We're going to go into the Diddy trial. We know it was day 2 of Cassie testifying. Day 1, we kind of highlighted. Day 2, we had, well, day 3 today. I'm going to go through day 3, day 2, get into some policy, this new tax plan. Also, for a fact, just to let you know, in the new congressional tax plan that Republicans are putting forward, there's something to help expand opportunity zones. Now, if you're familiar with T.I., any Nipsey Hussles, any Queen Latifah, I think she had a foundation that benefited from opportunity zones as well. Opportunity zones are going into urban, underserved communities. And the Trump administration and Republicans are saying, you know what, we're going to dedicate $100 billion over 10 years to these communities. Now, it's great to hear $10 billion a year for 10 years, $100 billion is great. We're going to energize our communities, but also realizing that that's really where some of the gentrification happens. So if they gentrify these communities, these rural urban communities that are now historic, preserved areas that were from the civil rights era, segregation, Jim Crow era of America, now they want to reinvest $100 billion into these same communities. How do we make sure and ensure that for Black people, communities of color, that we're just not losing grandma's house? You feel me? If they're going to reinvest, how do we make sure that we not only hold grandma's house, that we improve the property, that we're sitting here gaining, and also for a fact of it, that when the property value does increase, how can we make sure that we can sustain the insurance, the property taxes, and everything else that goes with that? So there's a huge part of that that I've reviewed. It's roughly 398 pages. And I'll be real with you. I'm going to say it transparent. I'm going to be real. I didn't read all of it. I know where to go through. We'll probably side by side and show you the narrative on top of what's actually there, but I threw it in GPT, y'all. Like, I'm not trying to read 398 pages before this page gets monetized. Because guess what? I need y'all to support. Now, luckily, I've been able to grow this channel to a point in the last 2 weeks. We've gone from roughly 400 subscribers to damn near, I don't know, over 1,200. Lucky, right? But also officially in the YouTube partner program. Now, I didn't decide to push, hey, give me $1 here, $2 here, super membership thing. I want to build it out. I just don't want to have y'all pay for nothing. And so I do want you to support. So support by subscribing, support by liking, support by commenting in the live stream so that the algorithm knows that people are actually here, they're engaging, and they're keeping it going, because I didn't expect realistically to gain over 800, 700 something followers in the span of 2 weeks. I was like, okay, we're going to slow drip this 500, 600, 700. Y'all helped me surpass that goal entirely. But either way, I got a couple minutes. I'm wrapping up here. What I'm trying to do, again, I'm a new streamer. So I haven't been doing this professionally for years. I've been a professional lobbyist for years, and getting out of my imposter syndrome, my comfort zone, like, you know what? Maybe I could stream, talk politics. Maybe there'll be somebody in the world interested enough to hear what your boy got to say, right? That's why you're here. Anyway, I'm not a full-time streamer. I just want to share the content and, you know, build a community of people who actually care about some of the stuff and talk them nonsense. And I've been guilty that I haven't been as focused as saying, you know what, hey, let's go through the statutes. Let's go. Like, I've just been streaming the stream. I need to have more structure with the stream. So hopefully we'll come back here at 5 o'clock after the daycare pickup. We'll try to test a little bit more of the structure. And if I'm not being as structured as I need to, just let me know in the comments. Like, hey, Phil, you're getting off task. You're rambling. Like, I think Robert told me earlier, bro, we want to see RFK. Tell me what's going to make this stream more professional, more engaging, more built, not only for this community, but built to engage you. So, like, you know what, Phil, let's hear from Trump. Let's hear from you at the end. We'll watch, we'll stay here a whole 2 hours, hop in and out, and hear what you got to say throughout, but just don't interrupt your man. But let me know as we continue to build this out. Either way, let me go with my son. I love y'all for now, but I gotta love him more. You know, I'm responsible to my man. So either way, I'll be back on.